A millionaire discovers he only has a few months to live. He decides to disguise himself as a janitor and infiltrate his daughter's school after finding out the principal was mistreating her. What the millionaire does next left everyone horrified. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching us from. We'll keep going. The sun had barely risen over the sprawling estate of Maxwell Rothschild when 7-year-old Sophia's eyes fluttered open. Her room, a lavish space that could easily house a small family, felt cavernous and empty. The walls, adorned with priceless artwork, seemed to loom over her small frame, a constant reminder of the expectations that came with being a Rothschild. Sophia sat up in her oversized canopy bed, her golden curls framing a face that looked far too serious for a child her age. She glanced at the ornate clock on her nightstand, 6:30 a.m. In precisely 30 minutes, Ms. Pemberley, her governess, would arrive to start her day. With a sigh that seemed to carry the weight of the world, Sophia slid out of bed. Her bare feet sank into the plush carpet as she made her way to the floor-to-ceiling windows. She pushed aside the heavy velvet curtains, revealing a view that would make most people gasp in awe. Perfectly manicured gardens stretching as far as the eye could see, a private lake shimmering in the distance, and beyond that the skyline of New York City. But for Sophia, it was just another reminder of the invisible bars that surrounded her. She pressed her small hand against the cool glass, watching as her breath created a small fog on the surface. In that fleeting moment, she allowed herself to imagine what it would be like to be on the other side. To run through those gardens without a care in the world, to splash in that lake without worrying about ruining her designer clothes. A knock on the door startled her out of her reverie. "Miss Sophia," Ms. Pemberley's crisp voice called out. "It's time to prepare for your day." Sophia took a deep breath, straightening her shoulders as she'd been taught. "I'm awake, Miss Pemberley. I'll be ready in a moment." As she turned away from the window, Sophia caught a glimpse of herself in the full-length mirror. The reflection that stared back at her was not that of a carefree child, but of a miniature adult, poised, composed, and utterly alone. The next hour passed in a whirlwind of activity. Sophia was bathed, dressed in a tailored navy blue dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary, and her hair was styled into perfect ringlets. As Ms. Pemberley fussed over her appearance, Sophia's mind wandered to the one question that had been gnawing at her for days. "Miss Pemberley," she began hesitantly, "do you know if my father will be joining me for breakfast today?" The governess's hands stilled for a moment before resuming their task. "I'm afraid Mr. Rothschild has an early meeting, Miss Sophia. He left for the office an hour ago." Sophia's heart sank, but she was careful not to let her disappointment show on her face. "I see," she said, her voice steady. "Thank you for informing me." Ms. Pemberley's eyes softened with sympathy, but she knew better than to comment. Instead, she straightened Sophia's collar and stepped back. "There now, you look perfect. Shall we head down to the dining room?" As they made their way through the vast corridors of the Rothschild mansion, Sophia couldn't help but feel like a stranger in her own home. The walls were lined with portraits of stern-faced ancestors, their eyes seeming to follow her, judging her every move. She wondered if they too had felt this overwhelming pressure to be perfect. The dining room was a grand affair, with a table long enough to seat 20 people comfortably. Yet as Sophia took her seat at one end, she felt impossibly small. A team of staff bustled around her, laying out a breakfast spread fit for royalty. Fresh fruits, artisanal pastries, imported cheeses, a feast that would go largely untouched. As she nibbled on a piece of toast, Sophia's eyes kept darting to the empty chair at the head of the table. She knew it was foolish to hope, but a part of her couldn't help but wish that her father would suddenly appear, apologizing for being late, ready to share a meal with her. But the chair remained empty, a stark reminder of the void in her life. After breakfast, it was time for her lessons. Sophia was ushered into the library, where Mr. Hartley, her tutor, was waiting. The library, with its towering shelves and the scent of old leather books, was usually Sophia's favorite place in the house. Today, however, it felt more like a prison than a sanctuary. "Good morning, Miss Sophia," Mr. Hartley greeted her with a gentle smile. "I trust you've completed your assignments." Sophia nodded, pulling out a folder from her bag. "Yes, Mr. Hartley. I've finished the calculus problems and the essay on the French Revolution." Mr. Hartley's eyebrows rose slightly as he skimmed through her work. "Impressive as always, Miss Sophia. Your father will be pleased to see your progress." At the mention of her father, Sophia felt a familiar pang in her chest. She wanted to ask if her father actually read the reports Mr. Hartley sent, if he ever commented on her achievements. But she held her tongue, knowing that such questions were beneath a Rothschild. As the morning wore on, Sophia threw herself into her studies with a fervor that would have impressed even the most dedicated scholar. She solved complex equations, dissected classic literature, and conversed in fluent French, all while a part of her silently screamed for something more. It was during a brief break between lessons that Sophia found herself drawn once again to the window. From her vantage point in the library, she could see the gate that separated the Rothschild estate from the outside world. A delivery truck was just pulling up, and for a moment, Sophia allowed herself to imagine what it would be like to climb into that truck and drive away, leaving behind the golden cage that was her life. "Miss Sophia," Mr. Hartley's voice jolted her back to reality. "Are you ready to continue with your history lesson?" Sophia turned away from the window, pushing down the longing that threatened to overwhelm her. "Yes, Mr. Hartley, I'm ready." As she settled back into her chair, Sophia couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing in her life. She had everything a child could possibly want, except for the one thing she truly needed: a connection with her father. Little did she know that miles away, in a towering skyscraper in the heart of Manhattan, Maxwell Rothschild was about to receive news that would change both their lives forever. The wheels of fate were already in motion, setting the stage for a journey that would test the bonds of family, challenge the notion of wealth and success, and ultimately teach both father and daughter the true meaning of love and sacrifice. But for now, Sophia remained trapped in her gilded cage, a brilliant mind and a lonely heart, yearning for something more. As she buried herself in her history textbook, she couldn't have imagined the storm that was brewing on the horizon, a storm that would shatter the carefully constructed world of the Rothschilds and force them to confront the truth about what really matters in life. Maxwell Rothschild stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his corner office, his steely gaze fixed on the sprawling cityscape before him. From this vantage point, 60 stories above the bustling streets of Manhattan, he felt like a king surveying his kingdom. And in many ways he was. At 45, Maxwell had achieved what most people could only dream of. He was the CEO of Rothschild Enterprises, a multinational conglomerate with tentacles reaching into every major industry. Forbes had recently named him one of the top 10 wealthiest individuals in the world. His name was whispered in the corridors of power, from Wall Street to Washington. Yet as he stood there in his custom-tailored Armani suit, Maxwell felt a gnawing emptiness that all his wealth and power couldn't fill. A soft knock on the door broke his reverie. "Mr. Rothschild?" His assistant Sarah called out. "Your 9 a.m. is here." Maxwell turned, his face a mask of cool professionalism. "Send them in, Sarah." As a group of executives filed into the room, Maxwell took his seat at the head of the large conference table. The meeting was about a potential merger, a deal that would add billions to the company's bottom line. It was the kind of high-stakes negotiation that Maxwell usually relished, but today his mind kept wandering. As the executives droned on about market shares and projected profits, Maxwell found himself thinking about the breakfast he had missed that morning. Had Sophia been disappointed? Had she even noticed his absence? "Mr. Rothschild?" One of the executives was looking at him expectantly. "What are your thoughts on the proposal?" Maxwell blinked, quickly regaining his composure. "The numbers look promising," he said smoothly, "but I'm not convinced about the long-term viability. Let's run some more projections and reconvene next week." The meeting adjourned, and Maxwell was once again alone in his office. He walked over to his desk, his eyes falling on a framed photograph, the only personal touch in the otherwise sterile space. It was a picture of Sophia, taken on her 5th birthday. She was smiling at the camera, her eyes bright with joy. Maxwell picked up the frame, his fingers tracing the outline of Sophia's face. When was the last time he had seen her smile like that? He couldn't remember. A wave of guilt washed over him. He had missed so much of Sophia's life, always too busy with work, always telling himself that he was doing it all for her future. But what good was securing her future if he wasn't there to see her grow up? His thoughts were interrupted by another knock on the door. This time it was Dr. Patel, the company's chief medical officer. "Maxwell, doctor." Patel said, his usual jovial demeanor replaced by a somber expression. "I have the results of your recent tests." Maxwell felt a chill run down his spine. He had undergone a routine physical a week ago, nothing to be concerned about. Or so he had thought. "What is it, Vikram?" Maxwell asked, gesturing for the doctor to take a seat. Dr. Patel sat down, his eyes filled with compassion. "I'm afraid I have some difficult news, Maxwell. The tests revealed a rare form of aggressive cancer. It's quite advanced." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Maxwell gripped the edge of his desk, his knuckles turning white. "How long?" he managed to ask, his voice barely above a whisper. "With treatment, maybe 6 months. A year at most," Dr. Patel replied softly. Maxwell felt as if he had been punched in the gut. 6 months. A year. After a lifetime of meticulously planning every aspect of his empire, he was suddenly faced with a ticking clock he couldn't control. "There are treatment options we can explore," Dr. Patel continued, but his voice sounded distant to Maxwell's ears. Maxwell nodded mechanically, barely registering the doctor's words about chemotherapy and clinical trials. His mind was racing, not with thoughts of board meetings or stock prices, but with images of Sophia. Sophia on her first day of school. Sophia learning to ride a bike. Sophia growing up without a father. "Maxwell?" Dr. Patel's concerned voice broke through his thoughts. "Do you want me to call someone for you?" Maxwell shook his head. "No, thank you, Vikram. I need some time to process this." After Dr. Patel left, Maxwell stood up on shaky legs and walked back to the window. The city sprawled before him, as vast and indifferent as ever. But now, instead of feeling like a king, Maxwell felt incredibly small and vulnerable. He pressed his forehead against the cool glass, closing his eyes. In that moment, all the trappings of his success, the corner office, the company, the fortune, felt meaningless. What was the point of it all if he wouldn't be around to see Sophia grow up? Sophia. The thought of his daughter sent a fresh wave of pain through him. He had always told himself that he was working hard to secure her future, to give her every opportunity in life. But in doing so, he had robbed her of the one thing she truly needed, a present and loving father. Maxwell's mind raced back to the last time he had really spent time with Sophia. It had been months ago, a brief dinner where he had been distracted by work calls and emails. He had promised her then that they would spend more time together, but like so many promises before, it had remained unfulfilled. Now, faced with his own mortality, Maxwell realized with crushing clarity how much time he had wasted. He had built an empire, but at what cost? He had everything a man could want, except for the things that truly mattered: a relationship with his daughter, memories of watching her grow, the simple joy of being a father. As the reality of his situation sank in, Maxwell felt a determination he had never experienced before. He might not be able to control how much time he had left, but he could control how he spent it. For the first time in years, Maxwell Rothschild made a decision that had nothing to do with business and everything to do with his heart. He reached for his phone, his fingers hovering over the speed dial for his assistant. But instead of calling Sarah, he found himself dialing a different number. "Rothschild residence," a crisp voice answered. "Ms. Pemberley," Maxwell said, his voice thick with emotion. "This is Mr. Rothschild. I'd like to speak with Sophia, please." There was a pause on the other end of the line, surprise evident in Miss Pemberley's voice when she spoke again. "Of course, Mr. Rothschild. One moment, please." As Maxwell waited, his heart pounding, he made a silent vow. He would make things right with Sophia. He would bridge the chasm that had grown between them no matter what it took. He didn't know how yet, but he knew he had to try. "Daddy?" Sophia's small voice came through the phone, a mixture of surprise and hope evident in that single word. Maxwell felt his throat constrict with emotion. "Hello, sweetheart," he said softly. "I was wondering, how would you like to have dinner with me tonight?" The silence that followed felt like an eternity. Then Sophia's voice, tinged with cautious excitement. "Really, Daddy? You mean it?" "Yes, I mean it," Maxwell replied, his voice firm with resolve. "I'll be home early. We can eat whatever you like." As he hung up the phone, Maxwell felt a glimmer of hope amidst the darkness of his diagnosis. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing for certain: he wouldn't waste another day. It was time to be the father Sophia deserved, to create memories that would last long after he was gone. With a newfound sense of purpose, Maxwell gathered his things and headed for the door. For the first time in years, he was leaving the office early, not for a business dinner or a board meeting, but for something far more important, a date with his daughter. As he stepped into the elevator, Maxwell Rothschild, the man who had everything, realized that he was about to embark on the most important journey of his life. A journey not measured in dollars and cents, but in moments and memories. A journey to reclaim the love of his daughter and, in the process, rediscover his own humanity. The elevator doors closed, and as it descended, Maxwell closed his eyes, silently praying that it wasn't too late to make things right. The Rothschild mansion was abuzz with an unusual energy as the staff prepared for an event that hadn't occurred in recent memory. Maxwell Rothschild was coming home early for dinner with his daughter. The news had spread like wildfire, causing a flurry of activity in the normally quiet household. In her room, Sophia stood before her mirror, her small hands smoothing down the front of her dress for the 100th time. She had changed outfits 3 times already, wanting to look perfect for this rare occasion. Her heart fluttered with a mixture of excitement and anxiety. "Miss Sophia," Miss Pemberley's voice called from the doorway. "Your father has arrived." Sophia took a deep breath, squaring her shoulders like she'd seen her father do in photographs. "Thank you, Miss Pemberley. I'm ready." As she made her way down the grand staircase, Sophia could hear muffled voices coming from her father's study. She paused at the bottom, her hand resting on the polished banister, suddenly unsure. What if he had changed his mind? What if work had called him away again? But before she could spiral further into doubt, the study door opened and Maxwell emerged. He looked different somehow, less the imposing figure she was used to seeing in glimpses and more human. His tie was loosened, and there was a softness in his eyes that Sophia couldn't remember ever seeing before. "Sophia," Maxwell said, his voice carrying a warmth that made her name sound new. "You look beautiful, sweetheart." Sophia felt a blush creep up her cheeks. "Thank you, Father," she replied formally, falling back on the etiquette that had been drilled into her. An awkward silence fell between them, neither quite sure how to bridge the chasm of years and missed moments. It was Maxwell who finally broke it, clearing his throat and gesturing towards the dining room. "Shall we?" he asked, offering his hand. Sophia nodded, placing her small hand in his. The gesture felt foreign, yet comforting. As they walked to the dining room, Sophia couldn't help but notice how large her father's hand was compared to hers, how it engulfed her own completely. She wondered if this was what it felt like to be protected, to be cared for. The dining room, usually a vast and empty space that emphasized Sophia's solitude, felt different tonight. The long table had been replaced by a smaller, more intimate one set for 2. Candles flickered softly, casting a warm glow over the room. As they took their seats, Maxwell seemed at a loss for words. He was a man accustomed to commanding boardrooms and making million-dollar decisions, yet here, faced with his 7-year-old daughter, he felt completely out of his depth. "So," he began, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant, "how was your day, Sophia?" Sophia, caught off guard by the simple question, blinked in surprise. When was the last time her father had asked about her day? "It was fine," she replied cautiously. "I finished my calculus assignment and started reading War and Peace in the original Russian." Maxwell's eyebrows shot up. "War and Peace? In Russian? That's impressive, Sophia." Sophia shrugged, unsure how to respond to the praise. "Mr. Hartley says it's important to challenge myself." Maxwell nodded, a flicker of guilt passing over his face. He had always pushed for Sophia to have the best education, but hearing her talk about reading Tolstoy in Russian at 7 years old made him wonder if he had pushed too hard. As the first course was served, Maxwell tried again. Do you enjoy your studies?" Sophia considered the question carefully. No one had ever asked her that before. "I like learning," she said slowly. "But sometimes I wish—" She trailed off, biting her lip. Maxwell leaned forward, genuinely curious. "You wish what, sweetheart?" Sophia hesitated. Then the words tumbled out in a rush. "I wish I could play sometimes, like the children I see in the park when we drive by. They always look so happy." The admission hung in the air between them, heavy with implications. Maxwell felt as if he'd been punched in the gut. He had given Sophia every material advantage, But had he denied her the simple joys of childhood? "I see," Maxwell said softly, his mind racing. "Perhaps we could arrange some play dates for you, or maybe a trip to the park." Sophia's eyes widened with hope, but years of disappointment made her cautious. "Really? You wouldn't mind?" Maxwell reached across the table, gently taking Sophia's hand in his. "Of course not. I want you to be happy, Sophia. I'm sorry if I haven't shown that very well." Tears welled up in Sophia's eyes, and for a moment Maxwell panicked. Had he said something wrong? But then Sophia smiled, a real, genuine smile that lit up her entire face. "Thank you, Daddy," she whispered, the formal father forgotten in the moment of emotion. As they continued their meal, the conversation flowed more easily. Maxwell found himself fascinated by the little details of Sophia's life, her favorite subjects, the books she enjoyed, even the name of her stuffed bear, Mr. Whiskers, apparently a gift from her nanny on her 5th birthday. For her part, Sophia drank in every word her father said, storing away each smile, each laugh like precious treasures. She told him about her secret dream of learning to play the piano, her fascination with the stars, and her desire to have a puppy someday. As the evening wore on, Maxwell felt a profound shift within himself. The business empire he had built, the deals he had made, the fortune he had amassed, none of it compared to the simple joy of talking with his daughter, of seeing her eyes light up when she spoke about her passions. But even as he reveled in this newfound connection, the specter of his diagnosis loomed in the back of his mind. How many more dinners like this would he have? How much time did he have to make up for all the years he'd lost? As they finished dessert, ice cream sundaes that Maxwell had insisted on, much to the chef's shock, Sophia stifled a yawn. Maxwell glanced at his watch, surprised to see how late it had gotten. "I think it's past someone's bedtime," he said gently. Sophia nodded sleepily, but there was a hint of worry in her eyes. Will you be here tomorrow?" The question, so simple yet so loaded, made Maxwell's heart ache. "Yes," he said firmly, making a silent vow to himself. "I'll be here. In fact, how would you like to have breakfast together?" Sophia's face lit up with joy. "Really? You promise?" "I promise," Maxwell said, the weight of those 2 words settling on him like a mantle. As he tucked Sophia into bed that night, another first, Maxwell felt a mix of emotions washing over him. Joy at the connection he'd begun to forge with his daughter, regret for all the time he'd wasted, and fear, bone-deep, visceral fear, of the limited time he had left. Watching Sophia drift off to sleep, her small hand clutching Mr. Whiskers, Maxwell made a decision. He wouldn't tell her about his diagnosis, not yet. He would use whatever time he had left to be the father she deserved, to create memories that would last long after he was gone. As he quietly left Sophia's room, closing the door behind him, Maxwell Rothschild, titan of industry and master of the financial world, finally understood the true meaning of wealth. It wasn't in his bank accounts or his real estate holdings. It was right here in this house, in the form of a brilliant, lonely little girl who still had room in her heart for a father who was only now learning how to love. The next few weeks passed in a whirlwind of activity for Maxwell Rothschild. By day he continued to run his vast business empire, attending meetings and making decisions that affected thousands of lives. But his nights and early mornings were now dedicated to Sophia. They had breakfast together every day, and Maxwell made it a point to be home for dinner as often as possible. However, despite these moments of connection, Maxwell couldn't shake the feeling that he was only scratching the surface. Sophia was still guarded, her smiles tinged with a wariness that broke his heart. He knew that years of neglect couldn't be erased in a matter of weeks, but the ticking clock of his diagnosis made him desperate to do more. It was during one of their dinners that Maxwell had his epiphany. Sophia was talking about her day at school, and something in her tone caught his attention. "And then during recess, I sat on the bench and read my book," Sophia was saying, her eyes fixed on her plate. Maxwell frowned. "Didn't you want to play with the other children?" Sophia shrugged, a gesture that seemed too world-weary for her 7 years. "They don't really... I'm not... It's fine, Father. I prefer reading anyway." The words hit Maxwell like a physical blow. He had been so focused on Sophia's academic achievements that he had completely overlooked her social development. What was her life like at school? Did she have any friends? Was she happy? That night after Sophia had gone to bed, Maxwell sat in his study, a tumbler of scotch untouched before him. He needed to know more about Sophia's life at school, to understand what she went through every day. But how? He couldn't exactly enroll as a student. As his eyes wandered around the room, they fell on a framed magazine cover, Forbes' 100 Most Powerful CEOs. His own face stared back at him, confident and imperious. And suddenly, an idea began to form. What if he could see Sophia's school life firsthand, without the filter of his reputation or wealth? What if he could be there, observing and understanding without anyone knowing who he really was? The idea was absurd, of course. Maxwell Rothschild, posing as a common worker. It was unthinkable, and yet, the more he considered it, the more appealing it became. It would allow him to see Sophia in her everyday environment, to understand her struggles and joys in a way he never could as her distant father. Decision made, Maxwell sprang into action. Over the next few days, he put his plan into motion with the same meticulous attention to detail that had made him a business legend. First, he reached out to an old contact in the film industry, an expert in prosthetic makeup. Under the guise of preparing for a costume party, Maxwell had the artist create a disguise that would make him unrecognizable. Graying hair, a mustache, glasses, and subtle changes to the shape of his face. Next, he invented a cover story. Maxwell Rothschild would be taking a leave of absence for health reasons, not entirely untrue, leaving the company in the hands of his capable COO. To the staff at the mansion, he explained that he would be traveling for treatment, but in reality, he would be slipping out each morning in disguise. Finally, using a series of shell companies and false identities, tools he had often employed in his business dealings, but never for something so personal, Maxwell arranged to be hired as a janitor at Sophia's prestigious private school. The morning of his first day, Maxwell stood in front of his mirror, barely recognizing the man who stared back at him. Gone was the impeccably tailored suit, replaced by a nondescript uniform. His usually clean-shaven face now sported a salt-and-pepper mustache, and his dark hair had been transformed into a graying mop. As he prepared to leave, Maxwell felt a moment of doubt. Was he really going through with this? But then he remembered Sophia's words, the loneliness in her eyes, and his resolve hardened. He would do this for her. Slipping out of the mansion before dawn, Maxwell drove to the school in a beat-up old car he had purchased for this purpose. As he pulled into the staff parking lot, he took a deep breath, steeling himself for what lay ahead. The school was a massive, imposing structure of red brick and ivy, its Gothic towers reaching towards the sky. Maxwell had visited before, of course, for parent-teacher conferences and the occasional event, but never like this, never as just another worker arriving for his shift. He reported to the maintenance office, where he was greeted by a gruff man named Frank, the head of facilities. "You must be the new guy," Frank said, eyeing Maxwell suspiciously. "Mike, right?" Maxwell nodded, remembering his alias. "That's right, Mike Peterson, pleased to meet you." Frank grunted, handing over a set of keys and a worn manual. "All right, Peterson, let's see what you can do. Start with the East Wing classrooms, and remember, stay invisible. These rich kids and their teachers don't want to see us unless something's broken." As Maxwell set about his tasks, he found himself gaining a new appreciation for the unseen workers who kept the school running. It was hard, physical labor, a far cry from the cushy executive suites he was used to. By mid-morning, his back ached and his hands were sore, but he felt a sense of accomplishment he hadn't experienced in years. But more importantly, he was learning. As he mopped floors and emptied trash cans, Maxwell kept his eyes and ears open. He observed the students as they moved between classes, noting the social dynamics at play. The popular kids, the outcasts, the quiet ones who seemed to fade into the background. It was a complex ecosystem he had never truly considered before. And then, just before lunch, he saw her. Sophia was walking down the hallway, her backpack almost as big as she was, her eyes downcast. Maxwell's heart clenched as he watched her navigate the bustling corridor, seeming to shrink into herself with each step. A group of girls passed by, giggling and whispering. One of them, a pretty blonde with a designer backpack, glanced at Sophia and smirked. "Hey, Brainiac," she called out. "Did you finish that extra credit assignment yet? Some of us actually have a life, you know." Sophia's cheeks flushed, but she didn't respond. She just clutched her books tighter and hurried on. Maxwell gripped his mop handle so hard his knuckles turned white, fighting the urge to intervene. He wanted nothing more than to sweep Sophia into his arms, to confront those mean-spirited girls and their parents. But he couldn't. Not if he wanted to truly understand and help. As Sophia disappeared around a corner, Maxwell forced himself to return to his work. But his mind was racing. In just a few hours, he had glimpsed a side of Sophia's life he had never known existed. She wasn't just lonely, she was actively excluded, singled out for her intelligence and work ethic, the very things he had always prized and encouraged. The realization was a bitter pill to swallow. In pushing Sophia to excel, had he inadvertently set her apart from her peers? Had his own driven nature, passed down to his daughter, become a source of isolation for her? As the day wore on, Maxwell continued his observations, all the while performing his janitorial duties with a diligence that surprised even the skeptical Frank. He watched Sophia in the cafeteria, sitting alone with a book while other children laughed and socialized. He saw her in the library during recess, buried in advanced textbooks, while her classmates played outside. By the time his shift ended, Maxwell was physically exhausted but mentally wired. He had embarked on this undercover mission hoping to understand Sophia's world better, but he had never expected the depth of what he would discover. As he drove home, his disguise safely stowed in the trunk, Maxwell's mind was whirling with plans. He needed to find a way to help Sophia navigate this social minefield, to balance her academic gifts with the equally important skill of forming friendships. But how? The answer, he realized, wouldn't come overnight. This was just the beginning of his journey, a journey that would require patience, understanding, and a willingness to see the world through Sophia's eyes. As days turned into weeks, Maxwell Rothschild settled into his new routine with a determination that surprised even himself. By day, he was Mike Peterson, the unassuming janitor who blended into the background of Westbrook Academy. By night, he was still Maxwell Rothschild, business tycoon and father, trying to bridge the gap with his daughter without revealing his daytime activities. It was a precarious balancing act, one that left Maxwell constantly exhausted, but oddly invigorated. Each day brought new insights into Sophia's world, peeling back layers of a reality he had been blind to for so long. On this particular morning, Maxwell arrived at the school earlier than usual. He had noticed that Sophia often came to school well before her classmates, and he was curious to see what she did during that time. As he pushed his cleaning cart down the quiet hallway, he caught sight of Sophia slipping into the library. Pretending to clean nearby, Maxwell watched through the glass doors as his daughter made her way to a secluded corner, pulled out a thick book, and began to read, her face lighting up with genuine joy. The sight brought a mixture of pride and sadness to Maxwell's heart. Pride in Sophia's love for learning, but sadness that she seemed to find more comfort in books than in the company of her peers. His musings were interrupted by the sound of footsteps. Maxwell quickly busied himself with mopping the floor as a tall, imposing man in an expensive suit strode down the hallway. Even without looking up, Maxwell could feel the man's gaze boring into him. "You there, janitor," the man's voice rang out, sharp and authoritative. Maxwell looked up, feigning surprise. "Yes, sir." The man before him exuded an aura of power and control that reminded Maxwell uncomfortably of himself in his corporate persona. This, he realized, must be the school's director, Dr. Edwin Blackwood. "I don't recognize you," Blackwood said, his eyes narrowing. "Are you new?" The other teacher nodded, glancing around nervously before replying. "I know. It's like he's got some kind of vendetta against her family. Remember how he was with her older brother before he graduated?" Maxwell's ears perked up at this, but the teachers quickly changed the subject as another colleague entered the room. As the day wore on, Maxwell's mind was whirling with this new information. He had always assumed that Sophia's academic pressure came solely from his own expectations and the legacy of the Rothschild name, but now it seemed there was another force at play, one potentially more insidious. The final bell rang, and Maxwell watched as the students flooded out of the building, a cacophony of laughter and chatter. Sophia emerged last, her face set in a mask of quiet determination that no child her age should wear. As she walked past him, Sophia stumbled slightly, her overstuffed backpack throwing her off balance. Without thinking, Maxwell reached out to steady her. "Careful there, miss," he said softly, momentarily forgetting his role. Sophia looked up at him, and for a brief moment, their eyes met. Maxwell's breath caught in his throat. Would she recognize him? But Sophia just gave him a small, tired smile. "Thank you," she said politely, before continuing on her way. Maxwell watched her go, his heart heavy. In that brief interaction, he had seen more of his daughter's true self than he had in years of distanced parenting. The quiet resilience, the hidden vulnerability, the weight of expectations she carried. It was all there in her eyes, if one only knew how to look. As he finished up his cleaning duties, Maxwell's resolve hardened. He had come to the school to understand Sophia's world, but he was beginning to realize that understanding wasn't enough. Something was wrong here, a hidden dynamic that was affecting not just Sophia, but potentially all the students, and Dr. Blackwood seemed to be at the center of it all. As Maxwell left the school that evening, his mind was racing with questions. Who was Edwin Blackwood really? What was his connection to the Rothschild family? And most importantly, what was his endgame with Sophia? Maxwell realized that his undercover mission had just become much more complex. He wasn't just here to reconnect with his daughter anymore. He was here to uncover the truth and protect Sophia from forces he was only beginning to understand. As he drove home, Maxwell made a silent vow. He would get to the bottom of this no matter what it took. Because now it wasn't just about making up for lost time. It was about safeguarding his daughter's future, and possibly the futures of all the children at Westbrook Academy. Little did Maxwell know, his actions had not gone entirely unnoticed. In his office, Dr. Blackwood stood at the window, watching the disguised janitor drive away. A small cold smile played on his lips as he turned back to his desk, where a file lay open. The name on the tab read, Rothschild, Sophia. The game, it seemed, was just beginning. The next few weeks saw Maxwell Rothschild living a double life with an intensity he had never experienced before. By day, he continued his charade as Mike Peterson, the unassuming janitor, observing and gathering information. By night, he was the doting father, trying to connect with Sophia while grappling with the unsettling revelations about her school life. One evening, as they sat in the library after dinner, Maxwell watched Sophia poring over a stack of advanced textbooks. The sight, once a source of pride, now filled him with concern. "Sophia," he said gently, "don't you think you're pushing yourself too hard? It's okay to take a break sometimes." Sophia looked up, her eyes wide with surprise at the suggestion. "But Father, Dr. Blackwood says I need to stay ahead. He says the Rothschild name demands excellence." Maxwell felt a surge of anger at Blackwood's manipulation, but he kept his voice calm. "Sweetheart, your worth isn't measured by your achievements. It's okay to just be a kid sometimes." Sophia's brow furrowed in confusion, as if the concept was entirely foreign to her. "But what would I do?" The innocence of the question broke Maxwell's heart. He reached out, gently closing the textbook in front of her. "How about we play a game? Do you know how to play chess?" For the next hour, Maxwell taught Sophia the basics of chess. At first, she approached it like another academic challenge, her face scrunched in concentration. But as the game progressed, something remarkable happened. Sophia began to smile, then to laugh as Maxwell made exaggerated faces when she captured his pieces. By the time they finished, Sophia's eyes were sparkling with a joy Maxwell realized he had rarely seen. "Can we play again tomorrow, Daddy?" she asked eagerly. "Of course," Maxwell replied, his throat tight with emotion. "And we can play every night if you'd like." As he tucked Sophia into bed that night, Maxwell's resolve strengthened. He would not let Blackwood or anyone else rob his daughter of her childhood. The next day at school, Maxwell began his covert investigation in earnest. He started by eavesdropping on staff conversations, picking up bits and pieces of gossip and information. "Did you hear about Dr. Blackwood's meeting with the board?" he overheard one teacher whispering to another in the break room. "Apparently he's pushing for even more rigorous testing, says we need to separate the wheat from the chaff." Maxwell frowned at the phrase. It sounded more like something a cutthroat businessman would say, not an educator responsible for nurturing young minds. As he cleaned the hallways, Maxwell paid close attention to the students' interactions. He noticed a clear hierarchy, with children from the wealthiest families at the top, but even among them, there was a palpable sense of stress and competition. One day, while cleaning near the administrative offices, Maxwell overheard a heated conversation between Dr. Blackwood and another staff member. "But sir," the voice pleaded, "some of these children are only 10 years old. The pressure is too much." "Pressure creates diamonds, Mrs. Henderson," Blackwood's cold voice replied. "If they can't handle it, perhaps they don't belong at Westbrook. We're not running a charity here." Maxwell's blood boiled at the callousness of Blackwood's words, but he forced himself to remain calm, knowing that losing his cool would only blow his cover. As the days passed, Maxwell began to piece together a disturbing picture. Dr. Blackwood seemed to be running the school less like an educational institution and more like a high-stakes corporate environment. Students were pitted against each other in ruthless competition, with those who couldn't keep up facing humiliation or exclusion. But it was Blackwood's fixation on Sophia that troubled Maxwell the most. He seemed to take a perverse pleasure in pushing her to her limits, constantly raising the bar and never offering praise. Only criticism veiled as encouragement. One afternoon, Maxwell was cleaning the trophy case when he noticed something odd. Among the gleaming awards and plaques, there was a small tarnished trophy tucked in the back. Curious, he leaned in to read the inscription, "Edwin Blackwood, valedictorian, class of 1990. Maxwell's mind raced. If Blackwood had been valedictorian, why was his trophy hidden away like this? And why did the year sound familiar? That night, after his chess game with Sophia, Maxwell retreated to his study and began digging through old files. It took hours, but finally he found what he was looking for. A folder labeled Rothschild Enterprises, Internship Program, 1990. With trembling hands, Maxwell opened the folder. There, among the stack of resumes and evaluation forms, was a familiar face. A much younger Edwin Blackwood stared back at him from a faded photograph, his eyes burning with ambition. Maxwell's breath caught as he read the notes attached to Blackwood's application. Brilliant mind, but lacks the necessary social graces, not Rothschild material. Suddenly, a long-forgotten memory surfaced. Maxwell remembered a board meeting from years ago, where a young intern had tried to present an innovative but risky business proposal. The board had laughed him out of the room, with Maxwell himself delivering the crushing final blow. "Perhaps you should stick to academia, young man. The real world of business is clearly beyond your grasp." Could that intern have been Blackwood? Had that humiliation set him on a path of resentment and revenge? As the pieces fell into place, Maxwell felt a chill run down his spine. Blackwood wasn't just a strict educator. He was a man with a vendetta, and Sophia, as a Rothschild, was at the center of his twisted game. The next day at school, Maxwell watched Blackwood with new eyes. He saw the calculating glint behind the man's stern demeanor, the barely concealed satisfaction when he pushed a student to their breaking point. During lunch, Maxwell overheard a conversation that confirmed his worst fears. "Did you see Sophia Rothschild's face when Dr. Blackwood announced the new academic challenge?" one teacher whispered. "I know," another replied. "It's like he's trying to break her. I've never seen a child look so stressed." Maxwell's hands clenched around his mop handle. He had to do something, but what? He couldn't confront Blackwood directly without blowing his cover and potentially making things worse for Sophia. As he pondered his next move, Maxwell noticed Sophia entering the library, her shoulders slumped under the weight of her backpack. Without thinking, he followed her inside, pretending to dust the bookshelves. Sophia settled into her usual corner, pulling out a stack of advanced textbooks, but instead of opening them, she just stared at the pile, her small frame shaking slightly. Maxwell's heart clenched as he realized his daughter was crying silently, trying to muffle her sobs so no one would notice. In that moment, all thoughts of maintaining his cover flew out the window. Maxwell approached Sophia, kneeling beside her. "Hey there," he said softly, forgetting to disguise his voice. "Are you okay?" Sophia looked up, her tear-stained face a mixture of confusion and desperation. For a split second, Maxwell thought he saw a flicker of recognition in her eyes, but then she blinked and it was gone. I can't do it," Sophia whispered. "It's too much, but I have to. I can't disappoint everyone." Maxwell felt his heart breaking. He wanted nothing more than to reveal himself, to sweep Sophia into his arms and tell her that none of this mattered, that she was perfect just as she was. But he knew he couldn't. Not yet. He had to find a way to bring down Blackwood and change the toxic culture of the school first. If he revealed himself now, He might lose his only chance to truly help Sophia and all the other students suffering under Blackwood's regime. The days that followed Maxwell's discovery about Dr. Blackwood's past were fraught with tension. Every interaction between Blackwood and Sophia now took on a sinister undertone in Maxwell's eyes. He found himself constantly on edge, torn between his instinct to protect his daughter and the need to maintain his cover. One morning, as Maxwell was mopping the floors near the administration offices, he overheard a conversation that made his blood run cold. "Dr. Blackwood, are you sure about this new program?" It was the voice of Mrs. Henderson, the school counselor. "The students are already under so much pressure." Blackwood's reply was sharp and dismissive. "Mrs. Henderson, we've been over this. Westbrook Academy is not for the faint of heart. If these children want to succeed in the real world, they need to learn to handle pressure." "But sir, Sophia Rothschild—" "Ah yes, our little prodigy." The way Blackwood said it made Maxwell's skin crawl. "She's the perfect candidate for this program. After all, the Rothschild name demands excellence, doesn't it?" Maxwell's grip on the mop handle tightened. He wanted nothing more than to burst into that office and confront Blackwood, but he knew he couldn't. Not yet. Later that day, Maxwell watched from afar as Blackwood approached Sophia in the hallway. Even from a distance, he could see the way his daughter's shoulders tensed at the director's approach. "Miss Rothschild," Blackwood's voice carried down the corridor, "I trust you're prepared for your presentation this afternoon? The board members are quite excited to see what our star pupil has come up with." Sophia nodded, her face a mask of composure that no 7-year-old should have to wear. "Yes, Dr. Blackwood, I've been working on it all week." "Excellent. Remember, Sophia, greatness is expected of you. Don't disappoint us." As Blackwood walked away, Maxwell saw Sophia's composure crack for just a moment. Her lower lip trembled, and she blinked rapidly, fighting back tears. It took every ounce of willpower Maxwell possessed not to go to her, to comfort her and tell her that none of this mattered. Instead, he watched helplessly as Sophia squared her shoulders and marched off to class, the weight of expectations visibly crushing her small frame. That evening at home, Maxwell found Sophia in the library, surrounded by stacks of books and papers. She was furiously scribbling notes, her brow furrowed in concentration. "Sophia," Maxwell said gently, "it's getting late. Don't you think it's time for a break?" Sophia looked up, startled, as if she'd forgotten where she was. "Oh, hello, Father. I can't stop now. I have to finish this research for my next project. Dr. Blackwood says it needs to be perfect." Maxwell felt a surge of anger at Blackwood's name, but he kept his voice calm. "Sweetheart, you've been working so hard. Why don't we play a game of chess, just for a little while?" For a moment, Sophia looked tempted. A flicker of the carefree child she should be shone in her eyes. But then it was gone, replaced by that all-too-familiar look of determination. "I'm sorry, Father, I can't. There's too much at stake." As Maxwell watched his daughter return to her work, he felt a deep sense of failure. Despite his efforts, despite the progress they'd made in their relationship, Blackwood's influence still loomed large over Sophia's life. The next day at school, Maxwell's worry for Sophia consumed his thoughts. He found himself cleaning the same spot over and over, his eyes constantly searching for his daughter in the bustling hallways. It was during lunch that things came to a head. Maxwell was emptying trash cans in the cafeteria when he heard a commotion. He looked up to see Sophia surrounded by a group of older students, their voices raised in mockery. "Look at little Miss Perfect," one of them sneered. "Think you're better than us, don't you?" Sophia clutched her books to her chest, her eyes wide with fear. I don't—" "Dr. Blackwood's pet," another student chimed in. "Always showing the rest of us up." Maxwell's protective instincts roared to life. He started to move towards the group, mop in hand, not caring if he blew his cover. But before he could reach them, a sharp voice cut through the chaos. "What's going on here?" Dr. Blackwood strode into the cafeteria, his presence immediately silencing the students. The group around Sophia dispersed, leaving her standing alone, trembling slightly. Blackwood's eyes swept over the scene, lingering on Sophia for a moment before landing on Maxwell. "Peterson, clean up this mess," he barked, gesturing to a spilled tray on the floor. As Maxwell moved to comply, he watched Blackwood approach Sophia. To anyone else, it might have looked like a concerned educator checking on a student, but Maxwell saw the calculating gleam in Blackwood's eyes, the way Sophia seemed to shrink under his gaze. "Miss Rothschild," Blackwood said, his voice deceptively gentle. "Are you all right?" Sophia nodded, her face a mask of composure once more. "Yes, Dr. Blackwood. I'm fine." "Good. Remember, Sophia, greatness often breeds resentment in others. You mustn't let it deter you from your path to excellence." As Blackwood walked away, Maxwell saw Sophia's shoulders slump. In that moment, she looked utterly alone, a small island in a sea of hostile faces. The rest of the day passed in a blur for Maxwell. He went through the motions of his janitorial duties, but his mind was racing, trying to figure out how to protect Sophia without compromising his mission. As the final bell rang and students began streaming out of the building, Maxwell made a decision. He couldn't stand by and watch his daughter suffer any longer. It was time to take action, even if it meant risking everything. That evening, after tucking Sophia into bed, Maxwell retreated to his study. He spent hours poring over every piece of information he had gathered about Blackwood and the school. There had to be a way to expose the director's manipulative tactics, to show the world the toxic environment he had created at Westbrook Academy. As the clock struck midnight, Maxwell leaned back in his chair, exhaustion and determination warring within him. He knew that what he was planning was risky. If he failed, he could lose everything. His cover, his chance to reconnect with Sophia, maybe even his company if Blackwood decided to retaliate. But as he thought of Sophia's tear-stained face in the library, of the weight of expectations crushing her spirit, Maxwell knew he had no choice. He had spent his life building an empire, amassing wealth and power. Now, it was time to use that power for something truly important, saving his daughter. With renewed energy, Maxwell turned back to his desk and began to formulate a plan. He would need allies, evidence, and perfect timing. But most of all, he would need courage, the courage to stand up against a system he had unknowingly been a part of for so long. As the first light of dawn began to creep through the windows, Maxwell finally allowed himself a moment of rest. Tomorrow would be the beginning of the end for Dr. Blackwood's reign at Westbrook Academy. And perhaps, just perhaps, it would be the start of a new chapter for the Rothschild family. One where success was measured not in dollars or accolades, but in love, understanding, and the simple joy of being true to oneself. Little did Maxwell know, the storm he was about to unleash would have consequences far beyond anything he could have imagined. The battle for Sophia's future, and the future of every child at Westbrook Academy, was about to begin. The next morning, Maxwell arrived at Westbrook Academy with a sense of purpose that belied his janitor's uniform. His plan was set in motion, and today would be the first step in bringing down Dr. Blackwood's oppressive regime. As he went about his morning duties, Maxwell kept a watchful eye on the comings and goings of the staff and students. He had spent weeks mapping out the school's routines, and now that knowledge would prove invaluable. His first move was to approach Mrs. Henderson, the school counselor. He had noticed her frequent clashes with Blackwood over student welfare, and he hoped she might be a potential ally. Timing his approach carefully, Maxwell managed to catch Mrs. Henderson alone in the staff room. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said, adopting his janitor persona. "I couldn't help but overhear your concerns about the students. I've seen some things that worry me too." "Mrs." Henderson looked surprised, then wary. "What do you mean?" Maxwell leaned in, lowering his voice. "The pressure on these kids, especially some of them like Sophia Rothschild, it ain't right. And I've heard things about Dr. Blackwood." Mrs. Henderson's eyes widened. She glanced around nervously before responding. "Mr. Peterson, was it? Perhaps we should discuss this further. In private." It was the opening Maxwell had been hoping for. Over the next few days, he carefully cultivated a relationship with Mrs. Henderson, sharing his observations and concerns. Slowly, he began to plant the seeds of doubt about Blackwood's methods and motivations. Meanwhile, Maxwell continued his covert investigation. He used his access as a janitor to gather evidence of Blackwood's questionable practices, copies of overly rigorous test schedules, emails discussing the weeding out of students who couldn't keep up, and most damning of all, a recording of Blackwood berating a young student to the point of tears. As he built his case against Blackwood, Maxwell also focused on supporting Sophia from afar. He made sure to be nearby during her most stressful moments, offering a kind word or a reassuring smile in his guise as the friendly janitor. It wasn't much, but he hoped it provided some comfort. One afternoon, about a week into his plan, Maxwell overheard a conversation that chilled him to the bone. He was cleaning near Blackwood's office when he heard the director on the phone. "Yes, I understand the board's concerns," Blackwood was saying, his voice tense. "But I assure you our methods are producing results. Just look at Sophia Rothschild's latest test scores. She's proof that my program works." There was a pause as Blackwood listened to the person on the other end of the line. Then his voice turned cold. "I see. Well, if the board insists on this evaluation, perhaps it's time we showed them just how special Miss Rothschild is. I have something in mind that will silence any doubts." As Blackwood hung up, Maxwell's mind raced. Whatever the director was planning, it couldn't be good for Sophia. He needed to accelerate his plan. That evening, Maxwell met with Mrs. Henderson in a quiet cafe far from the school. He laid out all the evidence he had gathered, watching as the counselor's face grew increasingly pale. This is horrible," Mrs. Henderson whispered, leafing through the documents. "But Mr. Peterson, how did you get all this? And why are you so invested in this?" Maxwell took a deep breath. It was time for a calculated risk. "Because," he said, dropping his janitor's accent, "Sophia Rothschild is my daughter." Mrs. Henderson gasped, her eyes widening in recognition. "Mr. Rothschild? But how? Why?" Quickly, Maxwell explained his situation, his diagnosis, his desire to understand Sophia's world, and the disturbing truths he had uncovered. As he spoke, he could see the counselor's initial shock giving way to understanding and determination. "We need to stop him," Mrs. Henderson said firmly, "for Sophia and for all the children. What's our next move?" Maxwell leaned forward, his voice low and intense. "We go to the board. With this evidence and your testimony, we can force an emergency meeting, but we need to move fast. Blackwood's planning something, and I fear Sophia's at the center of it." The next few days were a whirlwind of covert activity. Maxwell and Mrs. Henderson worked tirelessly to prepare their case, reaching out to sympathetic board members and gathering additional testimony from teachers who had been silenced by fear of Blackwood's retribution. All the while, Maxwell watched Sophia with growing concern. She seemed more stressed than ever, often skipping meals and staying up late into the night studying. He longed to reveal himself, to tell her that everything would be all right, but he knew he had to see this through to the end. Finally, the day of reckoning arrived. The board convened an emergency session, with Blackwood summoned to defend himself against the allegations. Maxwell, still in his janitor disguise, watched from the shadows as Mrs. Henderson presented their evidence. The boardroom erupted into chaos as the extent of Blackwood's manipulation and cruelty became clear. The director, for his part, remained defiant, insisting that his methods were necessary to maintain Westbrook's elite status. "You're all soft," Blackwood sneered. "The real world is cruel. I'm preparing these children for success." It was then that Maxwell made his move. Stepping forward, he shed his disguise, revealing himself to the stunned room. "Success at what cost, Doctor?" "Blackwood?" Maxwell's voice rang out, silencing the room. "At the cost of our children's happiness? Their childhood?" Blackwood's face drained of color as he recognized Maxwell. "Rothschild? But how?" Maxwell approached the director, his voice low and dangerous. "I've seen what you've done to my daughter, to all these children. It ends now." For a moment it seemed as though justice would prevail. The board members were nodding in agreement, murmuring about the need for immediate action. But then, just as victory seemed within reach, the boardroom doors burst open. Sophia stood in the doorway, her face pale and drawn. "Daddy," she whispered, her eyes locked on Maxwell. "What's going on?" The room fell silent as father and daughter stared at each other. In that moment, Maxwell realized that in his quest to protect Sophia, he had inadvertently shattered her trust. Blackwood, seizing the opportunity, turned to the board. "You see," he said, his voice dripping with false concern, "this is the lengths the Rothschilds will go to maintain their power, using a child as a pawn in their games." Sophia's eyes filled with tears as she looked from Maxwell to Blackwood and back again. You lied to me?" she said, her voice breaking. "Both of you?" Before Maxwell could respond, Sophia turned and ran from the room. He moved to follow her, but Blackwood's voice stopped him cold. "Not so fast, Rothschild," the director said, a triumphant gleam in his eye. You've just violated about a dozen school policies and privacy laws. I'm afraid this isn't over. Not by a long shot. As the boardroom erupted into chaos once again, Maxwell stood frozen, the weight of his actions crashing down upon him. He had set out to protect Sophia, to bring down a corrupt system. But in doing so, had he lost the very thing he was fighting for? Outside, a storm was brewing, mirroring the turmoil within Westbrook Academy's walls. As rain began to lash against the windows, Maxwell Rothschild faced the harrowing realization that his battle was far from over. In fact, it might have only just begun. And somewhere in the labyrinth of Westbrook Academy's halls, a little girl with the weight of the world on her shoulders ran, her heart breaking, unsure of who to trust or what to believe. The storm that had been gathering for so long had finally broken, and in its wake nothing would ever be the same. The rain pounded relentlessly against the windows of Westbrook Academy, mirroring the turmoil that had erupted within its walls. In the wake of Maxwell Rothschild's dramatic revelation and Dr. Blackwood's counterattack, the school had descended into chaos. Maxwell stood in the empty boardroom, his mind reeling from the events that had just transpired. The board members had dispersed in a flurry of heated discussions and hurried phone calls. Dr. Blackwood had been escorted to his office, a smug smile playing on his lips despite the serious allegations against him. And Sophia had run away. Her trust in both her father and her mentor shattered in one fell swoop. "Mr. Rothschild?" Mrs. Henderson's gentle voice broke through his thoughts. "We should go. The press will be here soon, and you need to find Sophia." Maxwell nodded numbly, allowing the counselor to guide him out of the room. As they walked through the corridors, he could feel the weight of curious stares from students and teachers alike. Word had spread quickly, and the once invisible janitor was now the center of attention. Where would she go? Maxwell muttered more to himself than to Mrs. Henderson. Where would Sophia hide? Mrs. Henderson squeezed his arm reassuringly. "Think, Mr. Rothschild. You've been watching her for weeks. Where does she go when she needs to be alone?" The answer hit Maxwell like a bolt of lightning. "The library," he said, already quickening his pace. "She always goes to the library." They found Sophia in the farthest corner of the vast school library, curled up in an oversized armchair, her face buried in her knees. The sight of his daughter, so small and vulnerable, made Maxwell's heart clench with guilt and love. "Sophia?" he called softly, approaching her with caution. "Sweetheart, can we talk?" Sophia looked up, her eyes red-rimmed and filled with a mixture of hurt and confusion. "Why, Daddy?" she whispered. "Why did you lie to me?" Maxwell knelt before her, fighting the urge to gather her in his arms. He knew he had to tread carefully. "I'm so sorry, Sophia. I never meant to hurt you. I was trying to protect you." "Protect me from what?" Sophia's voice cracked. "From Dr. Blackwood? He's always been nice to me. He pushes me because he believes in me." Maxwell exchanged a glance with Mrs. Henderson, who had hung back to give them some privacy. How could he explain the complexities of adult manipulation to a 7-year-old? "Sophia," he began, choosing his words carefully. "Sometimes adults can do things that seem nice on the surface, but aren't really good for children. I was worried about how much pressure Dr. Blackwood was putting on you." Sophia's brow furrowed. "But you always said I needed to excel, to uphold the Rothschild name." The words hit Maxwell like a physical blow. He realized with painful clarity how his own actions had contributed to Sophia's stress and isolation. "I was wrong," he admitted, his voice thick with emotion. "I was so focused on your achievements that I forgot what really matters, your happiness." For a long moment, Sophia was silent, processing her father's words. Then, in a small voice, she asked, "Is that why you pretended to be a janitor? To see if I was happy?" Maxwell nodded. "I wanted to understand your world, to see what your life was really like when I wasn't around. And what I saw broke my heart. I realized how much I had been missing, how much pressure you were under." Tears welled up in Sophia's eyes. "It's so hard, Daddy," she whispered. "I always have to be perfect. I can't make any mistakes. I'm so tired." Unable to hold back any longer, Maxwell gathered Sophia into his arms. To his relief, she didn't resist, instead burying her face in his shoulder as sobs racked her small frame. "You don't have to be perfect, sweetheart," Maxwell murmured, stroking her hair. "You just have to be you, and that's more than enough." As Sophia's sobs subsided, Mrs. Henderson approached, a gentle smile on her face. "Sophia," she said softly, "your father and I have been talking. We think it might be good for you to take a little break from school, just for a while, to rest and recover." Sophia looked up, her eyes wide with a mixture of hope and fear. "But what about my studies? What about Dr. Blackwood?" "Don't worry about that now," Maxwell said firmly. "We'll figure it out together. What matters most is that you're okay." As they left the library, Maxwell holding Sophia's hand tightly, they were met by a crowd of reporters and curious onlookers. Camera flashes went off, and a barrage of questions assaulted them. "Mr. Rothschild, is it true you went undercover at your daughter's school?" "Sophia, how do you feel about your father's deception?" "Mr. Rothschild, will you be pressing charges against Dr. Blackwood?" Maxwell pulled Sophia close, shielding her from the chaos. As they pushed through the crowd, he caught sight of Dr. Blackwood watching from his office window, his face a mask of cold calculation. Once safely in the car, Maxwell turned to Sophia. "I know this is all very confusing and scary," he said gently, "but I promise you everything I did was because I love you. Can you forgive me for not being honest from the start?" Sophia was quiet for a long moment, her small face scrunched in thought. Finally, she looked up at her father. "I think so," she said slowly. "But no more secrets, okay? Promise?" Maxwell felt a weight lift from his chest. "I promise," he said solemnly. "No more secrets." As they drove away from Westbrook Academy, the rain finally began to let up. A weak ray of sunlight broke through the clouds, hinting at the possibility of clearer skies ahead. But Maxwell knew that their troubles were far from over. Dr. Blackwood's parting words echoed in his mind, a clear threat of battles to come. The road ahead would be difficult, fraught with legal challenges and public scrutiny. Yet, as he glanced at Sophia in the rearview mirror, seeing a glimmer of the carefree child she should have been all along, Maxwell felt a surge of determination. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he would face them. For Sophia's sake, and for the sake of every child who had suffered under Blackwood's regime, he would see this through to the end. The war might have just begun, but Maxwell Rothschild was ready to fight. And this time he wouldn't be fighting for wealth or power or prestige. He would be fighting for something far more precious, his daughter's future, and the future of every child who deserved the chance to just be a kid. As they turned onto the highway, leaving Westbrook Academy behind, Maxwell made a silent vow. He would make things right, not just for Sophia, but for all the children who had been caught in the crossfire of adult ambitions. The journey wouldn't be easy, but with Sophia by his side, he felt ready to take on the world. He paused, gathering his thoughts. "You know, when I was running my business, I used to think that the only things that mattered were the numbers, profits, stock prices, market share. But I was wrong. The most successful companies, the ones that truly thrive, are built on creativity, innovation, and teamwork. Those are the skills you're learning every day at New Horizons." Sophia's brow furrowed in thought. "So, even if we don't always get the highest test scores, we're still learning important things." "Exactly," Maxwell nodded. "And here's the thing. We're not ignoring those tests. We're working on ways to help our students perform better on them without sacrificing the joy of learning. It's a balance, and we're still figuring it out. That's part of the challenge, but also part of the excitement." Sophia sat back, looking more relaxed. "I think I understand. It's like when we do group projects. Sometimes it's messy and hard, but we always learn so much in the end." Maxwell felt a surge of pride at his daughter's understanding. "That's a perfect analogy, sweetheart, and you know what? Your input, your experiences, they're incredibly valuable as we navigate these challenges. Would you be interested in joining some of our planning meetings? Your perspective as a student could be really helpful." Sophia's eyes lit up. "Really? You mean it?" "Absolutely," Maxwell smiled. "We're in this together, after all." As Sophia hugged him goodnight and padded back to bed, Maxwell felt a renewed sense of purpose. Yes, they faced challenges. Yes, there would be setbacks and critics and doubts. But with Sophia by his side, reminding him always of why they had embarked on this journey, he knew they could weather any storm. The next morning, as Maxwell prepared for another day of meetings and strategizing, he found a note slipped under his door. In Sophia's neat handwriting, it read, "Daddy, I had an idea for how we could help New Horizons students do better on tests without making school less fun. Can we talk about it at breakfast? Love, Sophia. Maxwell smiled, tucking the note into his pocket. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he knew that with Sophia's creativity and his determination, they would find a way forward. The Rothschild Education Initiative wasn't just changing schools, it was changing them too, shaping them into a formidable team bound by love, respect, and a shared vision of a better future. As he headed downstairs to hear Sophia's idea, Maxwell felt a sense of excitement building. The road ahead might be difficult, but with his daughter by his side, he was ready to face whatever came their way. The gentle warmth of a late spring sun filtered through the windows of New Horizons Academy, casting a golden glow over the auditorium filled with students, parents, and educators. At the podium stood Sophia Rothschild, now 12 years old, her poise and confidence a testament to the growth she had experienced over the past 5 years. "When I was 7, Sophia began, her voice clear and strong. I felt lost in a world that valued test scores more than happiness. Today, as I stand before you, I'm proud to say that we've created a place where both achievement and joy can coexist." In the front row, Maxwell Rothschild watched his daughter with a heart full of pride and eyes glistening with unshed tears. The journey that had begun with his desperate attempt to understand Sophia's world had blossomed into a movement that was reshaping education across the nation. Sophia continued, outlining the innovative program she had helped develop, a system that integrated test preparation into project-based learning, allowing students to master standardized material while still engaging in creative, collaborative work. The results had been remarkable, with New Horizons students now consistently outperforming their peers on state tests while maintaining their enthusiasm for learning. As Sophia spoke, Maxwell's mind wandered back over the challenges they had faced and overcome. There had been setbacks, of course, critics who claimed they were coddling students, policymakers resistant to change, and the constant struggle to balance academic rigor with student well-being. But for every obstacle, there had been a breakthrough. Maxwell remembered the day Sophia had burst into his study, eyes shining with excitement, as she outlined her idea for stealth test prep, incorporating key concepts and skills into engaging real-world projects. He had watched in amazement as she worked tirelessly alongside teachers and curriculum experts to refine and implement her vision. The Rothschild Education Initiative had grown beyond anything Maxwell had initially imagined. What had started as one experimental school had expanded into a network of institutions across the country, each adapting the core principles to their unique communities. More importantly, their success had begun to influence public policy, with several states now incorporating well-being metrics alongside academic performance in their education assessments. As Sophia concluded her speech to thunderous applause, Maxwell's gaze drifted to the back of the auditorium where a familiar figure stood. Dr. Edwin Blackwood, now a key ally in their education reform efforts, nodded in approval, a small smile playing on his lips. The transformation in Blackwood had been one of the most surprising and gratifying aspects of their journey. The former adversary had become a powerful advocate for change, using his influence and expertise to help bridge the gap between traditional education models and the more progressive approach championed by the Rothschilds. As the ceremony concluded and the auditorium began to empty, Maxwell made his way to the stage where Sophia was surrounded by well-wishers. She caught his eye over the crowd and beamed, excusing herself to run into his arms. "You were amazing, sweetheart," Maxwell said, hugging her tightly. "I'm so proud of you." Sophia pulled back, her eyes sparkling. "Thanks, Daddy. I was nervous, but then I remembered what you always say, that our story might help other kids who feel lost like I did." Maxwell felt a lump form in his throat. "That's right. And you know what? I think we've done just that." As they made their way out of the auditorium, they were approached by Dr. Blackwood. "Remarkable speech, Sophia," he said warmly. "You've come a long way from that quiet little girl I knew at Westbrook." Sophia smiled up at him. "Thank you, Dr. Blackwood. I couldn't have done it without your help, too." Blackwood chuckled, shaking his head. "Oh, I think you would have found your way regardless, but I'm grateful to have been part of this journey." As they stood there, the unlikely trio who had reshaped the landscape of education, Maxwell felt a sense of completion. The circle that had begun with his undercover mission at Westbrook had closed, but in its closing, it had opened up countless new possibilities for children across the nation. Later that evening, As Maxwell and Sophia sat in their garden, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant hues, Sophia turned to her father with a thoughtful expression. "Daddy," she said, "do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't come to my school that day? If you hadn't seen what was really going on?" Maxwell considered the question carefully. "I think about it sometimes," he admitted. "I shudder to think of the relationship we might have missed out on, of all the children we might not have been able to help." Sophia nodded, leaning her head on her father's shoulder. "I'm glad you did," she said softly. "Not just because of the initiative and all the good we've done, but because I got to really know you. And that's the best part of all of this." Maxwell felt his heart swell with love and gratitude. "It's the best part for me too, sweetheart," he said, pulling her close. "Everything else, the schools, the policy changes, the awards, that's all wonderful. But this, right here, this is what matters most." As the last rays of sunlight faded, giving way to the soft glow of twilight, Maxwell Rothschild reflected on the incredible journey that had brought them to this moment. From a distant father desperately trying to connect with his daughter, to partners in a movement that was changing lives across the nation, they had come so far. Yet as he sat there with Sophia, he knew that their journey was far from over. There would be new challenges to face, new minds to open, new lives to touch. But whatever lay ahead, they would face it together, father and daughter, bound by love, united in purpose, and committed to making the world a little bit better. One child, one school, one day at a time. As the first stars began to twinkle in the darkening sky, Maxwell made a silent vow. He would never forget the lessons he had learned, the value of presence over presence, of empathy over authority, of joy over mere achievement. And he would spend the rest of his days ensuring that every child had the chance to experience the kind of education and the kind of love that had transformed his and Sophia's lives. The end of this chapter was just the beginning of a new one, and Maxwell Rothschild, with Sophia by his side, was ready to write it. 5 years had passed since Sophia's groundbreaking speech at New Horizons Academy. The Rothschild Education Initiative had grown from a single experimental school to a nationwide movement, touching the lives of thousands of students across the country. As Maxwell Rothschild stood at the podium of a national education conference, he couldn't help but marvel at how far they had come. "Ladies and gentlemen," Maxwell began, his voice resonating through the packed auditorium, "when we started this journey, we had a simple goal: to create schools where children could thrive, not just academically, but emotionally and socially as well. Today, I'm proud to say that we've not only achieved that goal, but we've sparked a revolution in education." The crowd, a mix of educators, policymakers, and parents, listened intently as Maxwell shared the latest data on the initiative's impact. Graduation rates had soared, student satisfaction was at an all-time high, and perhaps most surprisingly to the skeptics, standardized test scores had improved across the board. But it wasn't the statistics that Maxwell was most proud of. It was the stories, the individual lives that had been changed by their work. As if on cue, a young woman stepped up to the podium, her eyes bright with purpose. "Hello, I'm Emily Chen," she began, her voice steady despite the large audience. 7 years ago, I was a student at Westbrook Academy, struggling under the weight of expectations and constant pressure. Today I'm a freshman at MIT, and I can honestly say that the Rothschild Initiative saved my life." Emily went on to describe how the changes implemented at Westbrook, inspired by the Rothschild model, had transformed her educational experience. She spoke of rediscovering her love for science through hands-on projects, of learning to collaborate rather than compete, and of finding her voice through programs that valued student input. As Emily concluded her speech to thunderous applause, Maxwell felt a familiar presence at his side. Sophia, now 17 and on the cusp of graduating from New Horizons, squeezed his hand supportively. "She reminds me of you," Maxwell whispered to his daughter. Sophia smiled, her eyes twinkling. "I was thinking the same thing about you, Dad. Remember when you used to give speeches like that, all nervous and determined?" Maxwell chuckled softly. It was true. Somewhere along the line, Sophia had become as much a mentor to him as he was to her. Her innate understanding of what students needed had been instrumental in shaping the initiative's programs. As the conference continued, Maxwell and Sophia listened to educators from across the country share their experiences implementing the Rothschild model. There were challenges, of course, resistance from traditionalists, funding issues, the ongoing struggle to balance academic rigor with student well-being, but the overwhelming message was one of hope and positive change. During a break, Maxwell found himself approached by a familiar face, Dr. Edwin Blackwood, now a respected advocate for education reform. "Maxwell," Blackwood greeted him warmly, "I've just come from a fascinating panel on the long-term effects of stress reduction in schools. The research supporting your methods is overwhelming." Maxwell nodded, a sense of satisfaction washing over him. It's gratifying to see the scientific community validating what we've known intuitively all along. "How are things at Westbrook?" Blackwood's face lit up. "Thriving. We've just launched a peer mentoring program inspired by Sophia's work at New Horizons. The change in school culture has been remarkable." As they chatted, Maxwell couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought them to this point. From adversaries to allies, their shared commitment to improving children's lives had forged an unlikely but powerful partnership. Later that evening, as Maxwell and Sophia shared a quiet dinner in their hotel room, Sophia broached a subject that had been on her mind. "Dad," she began, a hint of nervousness in her voice, "I've been thinking about college." Maxwell set down his fork, giving his daughter his full attention. "Oh? Have you decided where you want to apply?" Sophia took a deep breath. "Actually, I've been thinking, what if I took a gap year? There's so much work still to be done with the initiative, and I have some ideas for new programs I'd like to develop." Maxwell felt a surge of pride mixed with a tinge of concern. "Sophia, you know I'll support whatever decision you make, but are you sure you want to delay college? There's no rush with the initiative, it'll still be here." Sophia's eyes shone with determination, a look Maxwell knew all too well. "I'm sure, Dad. This work, what we've built together, it's my passion. I want to give it my all before I dive into college." As they discussed the pros and cons, Maxwell marveled at the young woman Sophia had become. Confident, compassionate, and deeply committed to making a difference in the world. He realized that the initiative had not only transformed education, it had transformed them both. The next day, as the conference drew to a close, Maxwell and Sophia found themselves surrounded by a group of students from various Rothschild-inspired schools. The energy and enthusiasm radiating from these young people was palpable. One student, a boy of about 14, spoke up. "Mr. Rothschild, Ms. Rothschild, I just wanted to say thank you. Before my school adopted your methods, I hated going to class. Now I can't wait to see what each day brings." As Maxwell watched Sophia engage with the students, answering questions and offering encouragement, he felt a profound sense of fulfillment. The ripple effect of their work was evident in each bright eye and eager voice. Later, as they prepared to leave the conference, Sophia turned to her father with a smile. "You know, Dad, when you first went undercover at my school all those years ago, I never imagined it would lead to all this." Maxwell pulled her into a hug. "Neither did I, sweetheart, but I'm grateful every day that it did." As they walked out into the bright sunlight, Maxwell Rothschild knew that their journey was far from over. There were still challenges to face, minds to change, and lives to impact. But with Sophia by his side and a growing army of passionate educators and students behind them, he felt ready for whatever lay ahead. The ripple effect of their work would continue to spread, touching lives in ways they might never fully know. And in that knowledge, Maxwell found a sense of purpose and joy that no amount of business success could ever match. The sun was setting on a warm summer evening as Maxwell Rothschild stood at the window of his study, gazing out at the sprawling gardens of the family estate. The years had etched fine lines around his eyes and sprinkled silver through his hair, but there was a vigor in his stance that belied his age. Behind him, the walls were covered with photographs, awards, and news clippings, a visual testament to the journey of the past 15 years. A soft knock at the door pulled him from his reverie. "Come in," he called, already knowing who it would be. Sophia entered, now a poised young woman of 22. She had just returned from her final year at university, where she had studied education policy and child psychology. "Hey, Dad," she said, crossing the room to join him at the window. "Reminiscing again?" Maxwell chuckled, putting an arm around his daughter's shoulders. "You know me too well. I was just thinking about how it all began. That day I showed up at Westbrook as a janitor. terrified I'd be found out. Sophia leaned into her father's embrace. And now look at us. Who would have thought that your crazy undercover mission would lead to all of this? All of this was quite something indeed. The Rothschild Education Initiative had grown beyond their wildest dreams. What had started as one man's desperate attempt to connect with his daughter had blossomed into a movement that had reshaped the landscape of education across the nation and beyond. "I got a call from the education secretary today," Maxwell said, a hint of pride in his voice. "They want to roll out our well-being-focused curriculum nationwide next year." Sophia's eyes lit up. "That's incredible, Dad. It's everything we've been working towards." As they stood there looking out over the grounds where they had spent countless hours brainstorming ideas and refining programs, both father and daughter felt a profound sense of accomplishment. But more than that, they felt grateful for the journey that had brought them closer together. "You know," Maxwell said softly, "of all the things we've achieved, the thing I'm most proud of is this, us, the relationship we've built." Sophia nodded, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Me too, Dad. I can't imagine what my life would have been like if you hadn't taken that risk all those years ago." Their moment of reflection was interrupted by another knock at the door. This time it was Sarah Chen, Maxwell's longtime assistant and now CEO of the Rothschild Education Foundation. "Sorry to interrupt," Sarah said, a smile playing on her lips, "but you both need to see this." She handed Maxwell a tablet, open to a news article. The headline read, "Rothschild Initiative Schools Show Record-Breaking College Acceptance Rates and Career Satisfaction." As Maxwell skimmed the article, his heart swelled with pride. The data showed that students from schools implementing their methods were not only excelling academically, but were also reporting higher levels of happiness, better mental health outcomes, and greater success in their chosen careers. "This is it, isn't it?" Sophia said, her voice filled with emotion. "This is what we've been working towards all along." Maxwell nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. It wasn't just about test scores or college acceptances. It was about creating a generation of young people who were not only successful, but also happy, well-adjusted, and ready to take on the world's challenges. As the three of them discussed the implications of the report, Maxwell's mind wandered back to the little girl Sophia had been, bright, lonely, and burdened by expectations she couldn't understand. He thought of his own younger self, so focused on success that he had nearly missed out on the most important relationship in his life. "Sophia," he said suddenly, interrupting the conversation, "do you remember that day in the library at Westbrook, when I found you crying over your textbooks?" Sophia's brow furrowed for a moment, then cleared. "Vaguely. It seems like a lifetime ago." Maxwell nodded. "It was that day that I realized I had to do something drastic. I couldn't bear to see you so unhappy. I never imagined it would lead to all of this, but in that moment all I wanted was to see you smile again." Sophia's eyes welled up with tears. She reached out and took her father's hand. "And look at how many children are smiling now, because of what we've done." Sarah, sensing the emotional weight of the moment, quietly excused herself, leaving father and daughter alone once more. As the last rays of sunlight painted the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink, Maxwell and Sophia sat down on the comfortable window seat, their favorite spot for heart-to-heart talks. "You know," Sophia began, her voice thoughtful, "when I was little, I used to think that being a Rothschild meant I had to be perfect. That success was all that mattered. But you taught me something far more valuable." Maxwell raised an eyebrow, encouraging her to continue. "You taught me that true success isn't about money or power or even academic achievements. It's about making a positive difference in the world and in the lives of others. It's about love, empathy, and the courage to stand up for what's right." Maxwell felt his own eyes growing moist. "I think we taught each other that, sweetheart. You showed me what really matters in life. You made me a better man, a better father." As they sat there, reflecting on their journey and the legacy they had built together, both Maxwell and Sophia felt a deep sense of peace and purpose. They had faced challenges, overcome obstacles, and transformed not just their own lives but the lives of countless others. The Rothschild name, once synonymous with wealth and power, now stood for something far more valuable: compassion, innovation, and a commitment to nurturing the potential in every child. As the stars began to twinkle in the darkening sky, Maxwell Rothschild looked at his daughter, his partner, his inspiration, his greatest achievement, and felt a love so profound it took his breath away. "So," he said, a twinkle in his eye, "what's next for us, Sophia? Surely we're not done changing the world." Sophia laughed, a sound filled with joy and possibility. "Oh, Dad," she said, squeezing his hand, "we're just getting started." And as they sat there, father and daughter, dreaming of the challenges and triumphs that lay ahead, both knew that whatever the future held, they would face it together. Their legacy of love and learning would continue to grow, touching lives and changing the world, one child, one school, one dream at a time. The end of this chapter was just the beginning of a new one, and the Rothschilds, forever changed by their journey, were ready to write it together. The crisp autumn air carried a sense of anticipation as Maxwell and Sophia Rothschild made their way up the steps of the Capitol building. Today was the day they had been working towards for months. A congressional hearing on a new education bill that would incorporate many of the Rothschild Initiative's key principles into national policy. "Ready for this, sweetheart?" Maxwell asked, adjusting his tie nervously. Sophia, now 23 and a formidable advocate in her own right, gave her father a reassuring smile. "We've been ready for this for years, Dad. It's time to take our vision to the next level." As they entered the imposing building, Maxwell couldn't help but reflect on how far they had come. What had started as a desperate attempt to connect with his daughter had grown into a movement that was on the verge of reshaping education across the entire nation. The hearing room was packed with legislators, educators, and media representatives. Maxwell and Sophia took their seats at the witness table, facing the panel of senators and representatives who would decide the fate of the bill. As the hearing began, Maxwell presented their case with the passion and eloquence that had become his hallmark. He spoke of the transformative power of education that prioritizes well-being alongside academic achievement, backing up every point with hard data from the schools that had adopted their methods. Sophia followed, her testimony providing a powerful personal perspective. She spoke of her own journey from a stressed, isolated child to a confident young woman, and how the Rothschild Initiative had changed not just her life, but the lives of countless other students. The questioning that followed was intense. Some legislators were supportive, citing the impressive results from Rothschild-inspired schools in their own districts. Others were skeptical, raising concerns about implementation costs and the perceived softening of academic standards. As the hearing stretched into its third hour, a particularly combative senator leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "Mr. Rothschild, Miss Rothschild," he began, his voice dripping with skepticism. "Your ideas sound wonderful in theory, but how can we be sure they'll work on a national scale? Aren't you just creating a generation of coddled children who won't be prepared for the harsh realities of the real world?" A hush fell over the room. This was the criticism they had faced from the beginning, the fear that had kept many from fully embracing their methods. Maxwell opened his mouth to respond, but Sophia beat him to it. "Senator," she said, her voice clear and confident, "I understand your concern, but I would argue that the harsh realities of the world are changing. The jobs of the future will require creativity, emotional intelligence, and adaptability, skills that our education model nurtures." She paused, making eye contact with each member of the panel. "But more importantly, we're not creating coddled children. We're creating resilient, empathetic, and innovative young adults who are eager to tackle the world's challenges. Isn't that exactly what our nation needs?" Her words seemed to resonate with many in the room, but the skeptical senator wasn't finished. "That's all well and good, Ms. Rothschild, but what about the costs? How can we justify this massive overhaul of our education system?" This time it was Maxwell who responded. "Senator, I would ask you this. What is the cost of not making this change? The cost in human potential, in mental health, in innovation lost because we crushed the creativity and passion out of our children." He leaned forward, his voice intense. "We've run the numbers. The initial investment is significant, yes, but the long-term savings, in healthcare costs, in social services, in economic growth driven by a more innovative workforce, far outweigh that initial outlay. This isn't just an education policy, it's an investment in our nation's future." As the hearing concluded, Maxwell and Sophia left the Capitol feeling cautiously optimistic. They had made their case as strongly as they could, But now the decision was in the hands of the legislators. Weeks passed, filled with tense waiting and last-minute lobbying efforts. Finally, the day of the vote arrived. Maxwell and Sophia sat in the gallery, hands clasped tightly as they watched the proceedings. The debate was fierce, with impassioned speeches on both sides. As the final votes were tallied, Maxwell held his breath. It all came down to this moment. "The bill passes," the speaker announced, "by a margin of 3 votes. The gallery erupted in cheers. Maxwell turned to Sophia, tears in his eyes, and pulled her into a tight embrace. They had done it. Their vision was about to become national policy. As they left the capital, surrounded by well-wishers and reporters, Sophia turned to her father. "You know, Dad," she said, her eyes shining, "this isn't the end. It's just the beginning of a whole new challenge." Maxwell nodded, a mix of excitement and trepidation coursing through him. "You're right, sweetheart. Passing the bill was hard, but implementing it across the entire country? That's going to be the real test." As they made their way home, both lost in thought about the monumental task ahead, Maxwell couldn't help but feel a sense of pride and purpose. They had come so far from that day he had disguised himself as a janitor, desperate to understand his daughter's world. Now they were poised to change the world of education for millions of children. The road ahead would be challenging, filled with obstacles and setbacks. But as Maxwell looked at Sophia, seeing the determination and passion in her eyes, he knew they were ready. Together, they had already achieved the impossible. Whatever came next, they would face it as they had faced everything else, side by side, driven by their shared vision of a better future for all children. As the sun set on this momentous day, casting a golden glow over the city, Maxwell Rothschild realized that their journey was far from over. In fact, the greatest adventure of their lives was just beginning. The first year following the passage of the National Education Reform Act, fondly dubbed the Rothschild Bill by the media, was a whirlwind of activity for Maxwell and Sophia. What had once been a personal mission had now become a nationwide undertaking, and the challenges they faced were greater than ever before. Maxwell stood at the window of his office, overlooking the bustling streets of Washington, D.C., where they had temporarily relocated to oversee the initial stages of implementation. The weight of responsibility sat heavily on his shoulders. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. "Come in," he called, turning to see Sophia enter, her arms full of reports and her face etched with concern. "Dad, we've got a problem," she said, dropping the stack of papers on his desk. "The rollout in the Midwest is hitting some major roadblocks. There's significant pushback from teachers' unions and local school boards." Maxwell sighed, running a hand through his now silver hair. "What's their main concern?" Sophia began pacing, a habit she had picked up during long strategy sessions. "It's a mix of things. Some are worried about job security, thinking our methods might lead to staff cuts. Others are resistant to changing teaching methods they've used for decades. And then there's the ever-present concern about maintaining academic standards." Maxwell nodded, unsurprised but still disappointed. They had anticipated resistance, but the reality of it was still disheartening. "All right, let's think this through. What worked for us in the past when we faced similar challenges?" For the next few hours, father and daughter brainstormed strategies, drawing on their years of experience in education reform. They decided on a multi-pronged approach: town hall meetings to address concerns directly, intensive training programs for teachers, and a public awareness campaign to showcase the benefits of their methods. As they worked, Maxwell couldn't help but marvel at the woman Sophia had become. Her insight, compassion, and strategic thinking had been instrumental in bringing their vision this far. "You know," he said during a lull in their planning, "I never imagined when I started this journey that you'd become not just my daughter, but my partner in all this." Sophia smiled, the same bright smile that had always warmed Maxwell's heart. "I never imagined it either, Dad, but I wouldn't have it any other way." Their moment of reflection was interrupted by another knock. Sarah Chen, their longtime associate and now Deputy Secretary of Education, entered the room. "I hope I'm not interrupting," she said, her face serious, "but we've got a situation brewing in California. One of the largest school districts is threatening to opt out of the program entirely." Maxwell and Sophia exchanged a glance. This was exactly the kind of domino effect they had feared. "All right," Maxwell said, straightening his shoulders. Sophia, you head to the Midwest, start with those town halls we discussed. I'll go to California and see if I can smooth things over there. As they prepared for their respective missions, Maxwell felt a mix of anxiety and determination. The stakes were higher than ever before. It wasn't just about one school or one district anymore. It was about the future of education for an entire nation. The next few months were a blur of travel, negotiations, and countless late-night strategy sessions. Maxwell found himself in heated debates with school board members, patiently explaining their methods to skeptical parents and demonstrating classroom techniques to wary teachers. In one particularly tense meeting in Los Angeles, a veteran teacher stood up, her voice sharp with frustration. "Mr. Rothschild, your ideas sound great on paper, but how can you expect us to completely overhaul our teaching methods? We're already overworked and underpaid." Maxwell paused, considering his words carefully. "I understand your frustration," he began, his voice calm but passionate. "Change is never easy, especially in a system as complex as education. But let me ask you this. Why did you become a teacher in the first place?" The woman blinked, taken aback by the question. "To make a difference in children's lives," she said after a moment. Maxwell nodded, a gentle smile on his face. "That's exactly why we're doing this. Our methods aren't about making your job harder. They're about giving you the tools to truly make that difference, to help every child not just learn, but thrive." He went on to explain how their approach could actually make teaching more rewarding, allowing for more creativity and personal connection with students. By the end of the meeting, the mood in the room had shifted from hostility to cautious optimism. Meanwhile, Sophia was facing her own challenges in the Midwest. In a small town in Ohio, she found herself addressing a packed auditorium of concerned parents and community members. "Ms. Rothschild," one father called out, his voice tinged with worry, "how can we be sure these new methods won't leave our children behind in the global marketplace? We need our kids to be competitive." Sophia took a deep breath, channeling the confidence she had developed over years of advocacy. "Sir, I completely understand your concern, but the global marketplace is changing. The jobs of the future will require more than just rote memorization and test-taking skills. They'll need creativity, emotional intelligence, and adaptability, all skills that our methods foster." She went on to present data from pilot programs, showing how students educated under their system not only performed well academically, but also showed higher levels of engagement, better problem-solving skills, and improved mental health outcomes. As the months wore on, Maxwell and Sophia began to see gradual shifts in attitude. Teachers who had initially been resistant reported increased job satisfaction. Parents noticed positive changes in their children's attitudes toward school. And most importantly, students were thriving. 1 year after the bill's passage, Maxwell and Sophia found themselves back in Washington for a progress report to Congress. As they prepared their presentation, Maxwell turned to his daughter. "Sophia," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "no matter what happens in there, I want you to know how proud I am of you, of us. We've faced challenges I never could have imagined, but we faced them together." Sophia hugged her father tightly. "We're not done yet, Dad, but we're making a difference. Real, lasting change. And we're doing it together." As they walked into the congressional chamber, ready to present their findings and face whatever questions came their way, Maxwell Rothschild felt a sense of purpose stronger than ever before. The road had been difficult, and there were surely more challenges ahead. But with Sophia by his side, and the knowledge that they were transforming millions of lives, he was ready for whatever came next. The journey that had begun with a father's desperate attempt to connect with his daughter had become a mission to reshape the very foundation of education. And as they stood before Congress, ready to continue their fight, both Maxwell and Sophia knew that this was more than just a professional accomplishment. It was a testament to the power of love, understanding, and the unbreakable bond between a father and daughter united in a common cause. 5 years had passed since the implementation of the National Education Reform Act, and the landscape of American education had undergone a profound transformation. The Rothschild method, once a radical experiment, had become the new standard, reshaping classrooms across the nation. On a warm spring morning, Maxwell Rothschild stood at the podium in a packed auditorium at Harvard University. His hair was now completely silver, but his eyes still sparkled with the same passion that had driven him for nearly 2 decades. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice strong and clear, "today we are here to present the findings of the most comprehensive study ever conducted on the impact of our education reform." The audience, a mix of educators, policymakers, and journalists from around the world, leaned forward in anticipation. This was the moment they had all been waiting for. Hard data on whether the Rothschild method truly lived up to its promises. Maxwell took a deep breath, then continued. "The results, I'm pleased to say, have exceeded even our most optimistic projections. Over the past 5 years, we've seen a 40% increase in overall student engagement, a 35% improvement in critical thinking skills, and a 25% rise in college readiness scores." A murmur of excitement rippled through the crowd. Maxwell went on to detail improvements in mental health outcomes, decreased dropout rates, and even early indicators of increased success in the workforce for the first cohort of students to graduate under the new system. As he concluded his presentation, Maxwell felt a surge of emotion. This was what he and Sophia had fought for all these years, tangible, measurable proof that their vision was making a real difference in children's lives. Speaking of Sophia, Maxwell's eyes searched the audience for his daughter, but her seat in the front row was conspicuously empty. A flicker of concern crossed his face, but he pushed it aside as he began fielding questions from the audience. After the presentation, as Maxwell made his way through the crowd of well-wishers and reporters, he felt a hand on his arm. It was Sarah Chen, looking uncharacteristically worried. "Max," she said in a low voice, "you need to come with me. It's Sophia." Maxwell's heart clenched with fear. "What's happened? Is she all right?" Sarah shook her head. "She's in the hospital. She collapsed during her guest lecture this morning." The world seemed to tilt on its axis as Maxwell followed Sarah out of the auditorium. The drive to the hospital was a blur, his mind racing with worst-case scenarios. Sophia had been working so hard lately, pushing herself to the limit as they prepared for this crucial presentation. Had it all been too much? At the hospital, Maxwell was led to a private room where Sophia lay in bed looking pale but alert. A doctor stood nearby, reviewing some charts. "Sophia," Maxwell breathed, rushing to her side. "Sweetheart, what happened?" Sophia managed a weak smile. "Hey, Dad, I'm okay. Just a little overdid it, I guess." The doctor cleared his throat. "Mr. Rothschild, your daughter is suffering from extreme exhaustion and stress. Her body simply couldn't take the pace she's been keeping. She needs rest. Significant rest." Maxwell nodded, guilt washing over him. Had he pushed her too hard? In their dedication to their cause, had he forgotten that Sophia was not just his partner but his child? "There's something else," Sophia said softly, reaching for her father's hand. "Dad, I'm pregnant." Maxwell's eyes widened in shock. Sophia had been so focused on their work, he hadn't even known she was seeing anyone seriously. "Pregnant? But how? Who?" Sophia chuckled weakly. "Well, I think you know how, Dad. As for who, you remember Michael from the policy team. We've been dating for a while now. We were going to tell you after the big presentation." As the news sank in, Maxwell felt a whirlwind of emotions: surprise, joy, concern, and a strange sense of things coming full circle. Here he was, about to become a grandfather, while still grappling with the challenges of being a father. Over the next few days, as Sophia recovered in the hospital, Maxwell found himself reflecting deeply on their journey. They had achieved so much, changed so many lives, but had it come at a cost to their own lives, their own relationships? One evening, as he sat by Sophia's bedside, Maxwell voiced these thoughts. "Sweetheart, I'm so proud of everything we've accomplished, but I can't help feeling like I've pushed you too hard. Maybe it's time for us to step back, let others take the lead for a while." Sophia considered this for a moment, her hand resting on her still flat stomach. "You haven't pushed me, Dad. This has been my choice, my passion, as much as yours, but maybe you're right. Maybe it is time for a new chapter." They spent hours talking that night, not as colleagues or education reformers, but as father and daughter, soon to be grandfather and mother. They laughed, they cried, they reminisced about the long, strange journey that had brought them to this point. As Sophia drifted off to sleep, Maxwell found himself making silent promises to his unborn grandchild. He would be present in a way he hadn't always been for Sophia. He would share the lessons he'd learned, not just about education, but about life, love, and the importance of balance. In the weeks that followed, as news of Sophia's pregnancy spread, Maxwell was touched by the outpouring of support from the education community they had built. Offers to step in, to take on more responsibility, came flooding in from all quarters. Gradually, a new plan began to take shape. Maxwell and Sophia would take a step back from the day-to-day operations, assuming more advisory roles. They would use this time to write a comprehensive guide to their methods, ensuring that their vision could be carried forward by others. As summer turned to fall, Maxwell found himself embarking on a new adventure. He threw himself into preparing for his grandchild with the same enthusiasm he had once reserved for education reform. He read every parenting book he could get his hands on, determined to be the best grandfather he could be. One crisp autumn day, as he and Sophia strolled through a park near their home, she turned to him with a mischievous smile. "You know, Dad, for someone who revolutionized education, you sure are nervous about this whole grandpa thing." Maxwell chuckled, wrapping an arm around his daughter's shoulders. "Well, sweetheart, I've learned that the most important lessons often come from the most unexpected places. I have a feeling this little one is going to teach us both quite a bit." As they walked on, discussing names and nursery colors, Maxwell Rothschild felt a profound sense of peace. The journey that had begun with a desperate attempt to understand his daughter had led them through challenges and triumphs he never could have imagined. And now, it was leading them into a new phase of life, with new lessons to learn and new love to discover. The sun was setting as they made their way home, casting a golden glow over the world. Maxwell looked at Sophia, saw the joy and anticipation shining in her eyes, and knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, just as they always had. The story of the Rothschilds was far from over. In fact, in many ways it felt like a brand new chapter was just beginning. The soft cry of a newborn pierced the quiet of the hospital room. Maxwell Rothschild, his silver hair disheveled and eyes bright with unshed tears, gazed down at the tiny bundle in Sophia's arms. His grandson, Ethan Maxwell Rothschild, had entered the world just moments ago, and already he had changed everything. "He's perfect," Maxwell whispered, gently stroking the baby's cheek. Sophia looked up at her father, exhausted but radiant. "Want to hold him, Grandpa?" she asked with a tired smile. As Maxwell cradled Ethan in his arms, a wave of emotion washed over him. He thought back to the day Sophia was born, how overwhelmed and unprepared he had felt. Now here he was, a grandfather, holding the next generation of Rothschilds. The journey had come full circle. In the weeks that followed, the Rothschild household settled into a new rhythm. Maxwell, true to his word, threw himself into his role as grandfather with the same passion he had once reserved for education reform. He could often be found in the nursery, reading to Ethan from a vast collection of children's books, or simply watching the baby sleep, marveling at the miracle of new life. Sophia, for her part, was navigating the challenges of new motherhood with grace and determination. She had taken a step back from the day-to-day operations of their education initiative, but her mind was never far from their work. One evening, as Maxwell was giving Ethan his bottle, Sophia entered the nursery, a thoughtful expression on her face. "Dad," she began, settling into the rocking chair across from him, "I've been thinking. Having Ethan has made me see our work in a whole new light." Maxwell looked up, intrigued. "How so, sweetheart?" Sophia leaned forward, her eyes sparkling with that familiar passion. "We've done so much to change the system, to make education better for millions of children. But what about the very beginning? What about early childhood education?" Maxwell nodded slowly, seeing where she was going. "You're thinking we should expand our focus to include younger children?" "Exactly," Sophia said, her excitement growing. "Everything I've read about child development shows how crucial those first few years are. If we could create a program that supports parents and caregivers, that gives children a strong foundation right from the start." As Sophia outlined her ideas, Maxwell felt a familiar surge of excitement. This was why they made such a great team. Sophia's ability to see new possibilities, to push their vision even further. Over the next few months, as Ethan grew and thrived, so too did this new branch of the Rothschild Education Initiative. Sophia, working from home between feedings and diaper changes, began developing a comprehensive early childhood program. Maxwell, meanwhile, used his connections and influence to secure funding and support for the new venture. Their home became a curious blend of business headquarters and nursery. It wasn't uncommon to see important policy documents sharing space with teething rings, or to hear the sound of a conference call punctuated by a baby's giggle. One day, as Maxwell was on a video call with education officials from across the country, Ethan decided to make his presence known with a particularly loud wail. Maxwell, without missing a beat, scooped up his grandson and continued the meeting. Ethan balanced on his knee. "Gentlemen," he said with a chuckle, "I'd like you to meet the newest member of our team. He's got some strong opinions on early childhood development." The incident, which could have been embarrassing, instead endeared Maxwell to his colleagues even more. It was a powerful reminder of why they were all doing this work, for the children, for the future. As Ethan's first birthday approached, Sophia and Maxwell found themselves reflecting on the whirlwind of the past year. They had managed to launch their early childhood initiative, which was already showing promising results in pilot programs across several states. But more than that, they had found a new balance in their lives, one that made room for both their passion for education and their love for family. On the eve of Ethan's birthday, as they sat in the garden watching the toddler take his first tentative steps, Sophia turned to her father. "You know, Dad," she said softly, "I used to think that our work was the most important thing in the world. And it is important, don't get me wrong, but this past year has taught me that there's something even more crucial: being present, being connected to the people we love." Maxwell nodded, his eyes misty. "I couldn't agree more, sweetheart. It's a lesson I wish I had learned earlier with you, but I'm grateful I get a second chance with Ethan." As if on cue, Ethan tottered over to them, falling into Maxwell's open arms with a delighted giggle. Maxwell hugged him close, breathing in the sweet baby scent of his grandson's hair. "How you know?" Maxwell said, a mischievous twinkle in his eye. "I think little Ethan here might just be our most successful educational experiment yet." Sophia laughed, reaching out to tickle Ethan's chubby feet. "Oh, and what has the esteemed Dr. Ethan taught us?" Maxwell's voice grew serious, though his eyes remained soft with love. "He's taught us that learning starts from the very beginning, with love and presence and joy. He's reminded us why we started this journey in the first place, not just to change systems, but to change lives. To give every child the chance to grow and thrive and be happy." As the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink, the three Rothschilds sat together in the garden. Ethan, tired from his adventures in walking, had fallen asleep in Maxwell's arms. Sophia leaned her head on her father's shoulder, a contented smile on her face. In that moment, Maxwell Rothschild felt a profound sense of peace and purpose. The journey that had begun with a desperate attempt to connect with his daughter had led them here, to a place of deep understanding, shared passion, and boundless love. As he looked to the future, he saw not just the continued growth of their education initiative, but the growth of their family, of Ethan, of the countless children whose lives they would touch. The story of the Rothschilds was far from over. In fact, with little Ethan representing a new generation, it felt like a whole new chapter was just beginning. And Maxwell, with Sophia by his side and Ethan in his arms, was ready for whatever adventures lay ahead. As the first stars began to twinkle in the darkening sky, Maxwell made a silent vow. He would continue to work tirelessly to improve education for all children, but he would never again lose sight of what truly mattered: the love, connection, and joy that were the real foundations of a life well lived. With this balance, he knew that the best was yet to come. For him, for Sophia, for Ethan, and for all the children whose lives they would touch in the years ahead. 5 years had passed since Ethan's birth, and the world of education continued to evolve at a rapid pace. The Rothschild Education Initiative, now a global phenomenon, faced new challenges as technology reshaped the learning landscape and societal changes demanded fresh approaches. Maxwell Rothschild, now in his early 70s but still sharp as ever, sat in his home office surrounded by a mix of traditional books and cutting-edge gadgets. On his computer screen, a video call connected him with education leaders from around the world. "The integration of artificial intelligence in classrooms is inevitable," a stern-faced woman from Singapore was saying. "We need to address this now or we risk falling behind." Maxwell nodded thoughtfully. You're right, of course, but we must ensure that technology enhances rather than replaces the human element in education. Our focus has always been on nurturing the whole child, their creativity, emotional intelligence, and critical thinking skills. We can't lose sight of that. As the meeting continued, Maxwell heard the patter of small feet in the hallway. Moments later, the door burst open, and 5-year-old Ethan bounded in, his curly hair a wild mess and his eyes bright with excitement. "Grandpa, Grandpa, look what I made!" Ethan exclaimed, waving a tablet in the air. Maxwell quickly muted his microphone, giving his grandson an indulgent smile. "Just a moment, sweetheart. Grandpa's in a meeting. Why don't you show your mom and I'll be there soon?" As Ethan scampered off, Maxwell turned back to the screen, but his mind was already racing with new ideas. The interruption, far from being an annoyance, had sparked a realization. Later that evening, as the Rothschild family sat around the dinner table, Maxwell shared his thoughts. "You know, Ethan's interruption today got me thinking. We're so focused on how to integrate technology into education, but maybe we're approaching it from the wrong angle." Sophia looked up from helping Ethan cut his chicken. "What do you mean, Dad?" Maxwell leaned forward, his eyes alight with that familiar passion. "We should be looking at how children like Ethan are already using technology. They're naturals at it. Instead of trying to fit tech into our existing frameworks, maybe we need to build new frameworks around how they naturally interact with it." Over the next few weeks, this idea began to take shape. Maxwell and Sophia, along with their team, started observing children's natural interactions with technology. They watched how Ethan and his friends seamlessly blended digital and physical play, how they used apps to explore their curiosity about the world, and how they intuitively grasped concepts that many adults struggled with. One day, as Maxwell was watching Ethan play an educational game on his tablet, he noticed something interesting. The boy wasn't just passively consuming content, he was actively trying to figure out how the game worked, even attempting to hack it to unlock new features. "Ethan," Maxwell asked, "what are you trying to do there?" Ethan looked up, his brow furrowed in concentration. "I'm trying to make the game do what I want. It's fun to figure out how things work." This observation led to a breakthrough. The Rothschild team began developing a new educational platform that didn't just teach children facts or skills, but encouraged them to explore, experiment, and even hack the learning process itself. The goal was to nurture not just knowledge, but a deep understanding of how to learn and adapt in a rapidly changing world. As they worked on this new initiative, Maxwell and Sophia faced their share of skeptics. Some argued that this approach was too unstructured, that children needed more guidance and discipline. Others feared it might exacerbate the digital divide, giving even more advantages to children who already had access to technology. These were valid concerns, and the Rothschilds took them seriously. They worked tirelessly to ensure their new platform was accessible to all, partnering with tech companies to provide devices and internet access to underserved communities. They also integrated safeguards and guidance systems to ensure children were learning in a safe, age-appropriate manner. One evening, as Maxwell was tucking Ethan into bed, the boy asked a question that caught him off guard. "Grandpa, why do you and Mom work so hard to change schools? Aren't schools already good?" Maxwell sat on the edge of the bed, considering how to explain their life's work to a 5-year-old. "Well, Ethan," he began, "schools are good, but we believe they can be even better. We want every child to love learning as much as you do, to be excited about discovering new things every day." Ethan nodded solemnly. "Like how I get excited when I figure out a new game." "Exactly like that," Maxwell smiled. "We want school to feel like the best game ever, where learning is an adventure." As Ethan drifted off to sleep, Maxwell found himself reflecting on their journey once again. From his desperate undercover mission at Westbrook Academy to this moment, sitting by his grandson's bedside, it had been a path filled with challenges, triumphs, and constant evolution. The next day, as Maxwell and Sophia presented their new platform to a group of international educators, they could feel the excitement building in the room. This wasn't just another educational tool, it was a new way of thinking about learning itself. "What we're proposing," Sophia explained, her voice confident and passionate, "is not just a new method, but a new mindset. We're not just preparing children for the future, we're giving them the tools to shape that future." As the presentation concluded, the room erupted in applause. Questions and ideas flew back and forth, the energy palpable as educators from around the world saw the possibilities this new approach offered. In the midst of the excitement, Maxwell felt a tug on his sleeve. He looked down to see Ethan, who had insisted on attending the presentation, looking up at him with wide eyes. "Grandpa," Ethan whispered, "I think I understand now. You and Mom are trying to make school as fun as playing, right?" Maxwell knelt down, meeting his grandson's eyes. "That's right, Ethan, but it's more than that. We're trying to make learning a lifelong adventure, something you'll want to do forever." As they left the conference center that day, Maxwell holding Ethan's hand and Sophia walking beside them, he felt a profound sense of continuity. The work they had started so many years ago was evolving, growing, adapting to new challenges and opportunities. And now, with Ethan and his generation, it would continue to evolve in ways they couldn't even imagine. The sun was setting as they made their way home, casting a golden glow over the city. Maxwell looked at Sophia, saw the pride and determination in her eyes, then down at Ethan, bubbling with curiosity and energy. He knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, the spirit of innovation and compassion that had driven their work from the beginning would continue to light the way. The story of the Rothschilds and their educational revolution was far from over. In fact, with each new generation, each new challenge, it was only just beginning. The grand auditorium of the newly inaugurated Rothschild Center for Educational Innovation was filled to capacity. Educators, policymakers, and students from around the world had gathered for a momentous occasion, the 25th anniversary of the Rothschild Education Initiative and the official handover of leadership to the next generation. Maxwell Rothschild, now in his early 80s, stood at the podium, his once silver hair now white as snow, but his eyes still twinkling with the same passion that had driven him for over 2 decades. Beside him stood Sophia, a picture of grace and determination, and young Ethan, now 15 and already showing signs of the same innovative spirit that had defined his family's legacy. 25 years ago, Maxwell began, his voice strong despite his years, we embarked on a journey to transform education. What started as a desperate attempt to understand my daughter's world became a mission to change the world for all children. As Maxwell spoke, images flashed on the screen behind him. The early days at Westbrook Academy, the founding of New Horizons, the passing of the National Education Reform Act, and the countless milestones that followed. We faced skepticism, resistance, and seemingly insurmountable challenges, Maxwell continued, but we persevered, driven by a simple belief that every child deserves the chance to learn, grow, and thrive in an environment that nurtures their unique potential. Sophia stepped forward, placing a hand on her father's shoulder. Our journey has been one of constant evolution, she added. From rethinking classroom dynamics to integrating cutting-edge technology, we've strived to stay ahead of the curve, always keeping the well-being of children at the heart of everything we do. As Sophia spoke, Maxwell's mind wandered back over the years. He remembered the little girl who had felt so lost and alone at Westbrook, the young woman who had become his partner in this grand endeavor, and now the accomplished leader standing beside him. His heart swelled with pride and love. But perhaps our greatest achievement, Sophia continued, isn't measured in policy changes or test scores. It's in the millions of smiling faces, the spark of curiosity in a child's eyes, the teachers who've rediscovered their passion for education. It's in the stories we hear every day of lives transformed through learning. At this point, Ethan stepped forward, his youthful energy a stark contrast to his grandfather's weathered wisdom. And now, he said, his voice clear and confident, we look to the future, a future where education isn't just about preparing for a career, but about nurturing the skills and values needed to shape a better world. As Ethan outlined his vision for the next phase of the Rothschild Initiative, Maxwell felt a profound sense of continuity. The torch was being passed, not just within his family, but to a new generation of educators and innovators around the world who had been inspired by their work. The ceremony continued with testimonials from students, teachers, and parents whose lives had been touched by the Rothschild Initiative. Each story reinforced the profound impact of their work, from inner-city schools in America to remote villages in developing countries. As the event drew to a close, Maxwell stepped up to the podium one last time. "Before we end," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "I want to share a personal reflection. The room fell silent, all eyes on the man who had started it all. When I first disguised myself as a janitor at my daughter's school, I thought I was embarking on a mission to fix her education. What I didn't realize was that I was the one who needed to be educated. Sophia, and later Ethan, taught me the most valuable lessons of all, about love, presence, and the true meaning of success. Maxwell paused, his eyes misty. To all the children out there and to the child in each of us, I say this: never stop learning, never stop questioning, and never, ever stop believing in your power to change the world. As the audience rose in a standing ovation, Maxwell embraced Sophia and Ethan. In that moment, surrounded by the fruits of their labor and the promise of the future, the three generations of Rothschilds stood united, a living testament to the power of love, dedication, and the transformative potential of education. The ceremony ended, but the work would continue. In classrooms and homes around the world, the seeds they had planted would continue to grow, nurtured by educators, parents, and children who believed in the Rothschild vision of education as a force for positive change. As they left the auditorium, stepping out into the bright sunlight, Maxwell looked at Sophia and Ethan, then out at the world that stretched before them. He knew that whatever challenges the future held, the spirit of innovation, compassion, and unwavering commitment to children's well-being that had defined their journey would live on. The story of the Rothschild Education Initiative was far from over. In fact, in many ways, it was just beginning. With each child who discovered the joy of learning, with each educator who found new ways to inspire, with each mind open to the possibilities of a brighter future, their legacy would continue to grow and evolve. And so as the sun set on this chapter of their lives, it also rose on countless new beginnings, a fitting tribute to a family who had dedicated their lives to the belief that every day, every moment, was an opportunity to learn, to grow, and to make the world a little bit better. Maxwell Rothschild, the man who had once been so lost in his pursuit of success that he'd nearly lost his daughter, now stood at the culmination of a journey he could never have imagined. But as he looked at Sophia and Ethan, he knew that the greatest success, the most profound legacy, was the love and purpose they shared. As they walked away from the center that bore their name, Maxwell Rothschild felt a peace he had never known before. The journey that had begun with a father's desperate attempt to connect with his daughter had blossomed into a movement that had changed the world. And in changing the world, it had changed them all. The end? No, Maxwell thought with a smile. This was just the beginning of a whole new adventure.